Okay, so we're going to get started. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to staff and residents who are here to speak on the budget, and to councillors on the committee. This meeting is taking place on unceded, unsurrendered Algonquin Anishinaabe territory. I'll turn to our clerk's office to go through the roll call, please. Chris.
Councillor Brockington.
Here.
Councillor Brown.
Here.
Councillor Curry.
Here.
Councillor Devine.
Here.
Councillor Hill.
Present.
Councillor Kavanaugh.
Present.
Councillor King.
Here.
Councillor Luloff.
Good morning, Chris.
Councillor Tierney.
Present.
Vice Chair Carr.
Present.
And Chair Menard, you have quorum, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Chris. So today's our budget meeting. We have, are there any declarations of interest, councillors? Seeing none. Are the minutes of the Environment and Climate Change Committee of Tuesday, the 15th of October, 2024 confirmed? Thank you very much. And we're going to hold the 4.1, the 2025 draft operating and capital budget for Environment and Climate Change Committee. There, we're going to receive a presentation from staff, and there are 6 delegations that are here to speak to that item as well. The next item on the agenda is the financial statements for in-house solid waste collection, external audit results. Does anyone from committee want that item held? We have no staff presentation, no registered speakers, so can we carry that item? Okay, fantastic. Thanks so much. There's also an IPD on the agenda as well on the normal farm practices. Is anyone asking that there be questions on that for this time or next time around? Okay, so we'll carry that item as well. So we're back to the 2025 draft operating and capital budget. I'll just invite our staff team. They're already here. So good to see you. You're ready to go. We'll start with a staff presentation and then we'll move into delegations after that. So Cyril, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So we'll just give it a minute for the presentation to come on screen, but this is the first one out of the gate. So our first committee meeting out of the 2025 budget tabling. So I'm joined by my colleagues to my right here with Tammy, Debbie, and Alan. We'll go through the presentation. I'll go through the front end part of the presentation from a financial perspective, and then each of my GM colleagues will go through a little more detail. There might be some repetitiveness in terms of what we say, but it's kind of key because there's some key highlights in this budget for the Environment Committee. You can go to the next slide. This committee is kind of broken into 2 components. One component that we refer to as a set tax side. A little bit of a nuance there. The solid waste services is now a fully fee recovered service as per the approved long range financial plan back in June. And then the second part of the presentation will be the rate side, which we focus on the drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater services areas. So proceeding to the next slide. So what you have before you today is basically, this is the tax components. So again, forestry, solid waste, infrastructure services, the non-water, drinking water, wastewater component before you right on the screen. Overall, the gross budget is $260.2 million when you take out the recoveries and allocations. And just for a point of clarification, recoveries and allocations, this is where basically we have our true costs in terms of our salaries, materials, contracts, et cetera. On the operating side, recoveries and allocations is where we charge things back to capital projects. So there, of all the capital projects, these are mainly where we do charges back there. A little bit of a nuance in the forestry area of the budget. If you go to that respective template in the details, you'll see a recoveries line, but just above that, you'll see a other internal cost line. And what that reflects is basically forestry operates on a activity-based type structure where we push the cost down to the different service areas within forestry, whether it be tree maintenance, pruning, et cetera. So that's where you see the internal costs and the recoveries costs kind of offset each other, just as a little nuance. In this component of the budget, we do have just over $123 million worth of revenue. This is majority, the most part of that is within solid waste. So all that revenue comes from the solid waste program. And then that falls down to a net requirement of 38.5 overall at a high level. From an FTE perspective, there is 30 FTE growth in this budget for 2025, spread across several areas. There's 11 FTEs in solid waste. There's 12 in infrastructure services, 4 in asset management, and then 3 in the forestry side, which my colleagues will speak to a little bit later. On the capital side, so again, this is new last year, but kind of enhanced again this cycle. We're really trying to do that linkage with the capital program to climate change. So if you go through a detailed budget, you'll see every capital project as a spot up in the top where it talks about greenhouse gas reductions and resiliency. And we work closely with the climate change team and the departments to identify the low, medium, high impacts. And that's how we define what you see before you here. So overall, the $48 million capital budget, there's 17 projects in total. And then we kind of break down the number of projects that are actually contributing to those kind of climate change lens, if you will. Next slide, please. Again, this is all the service areas within this component of the budget. So as I previously mentioned, there before you, I don't need to go in detail. The biggest one is the solid waste. Obviously, this is the biggest program on the tax side of the budget. Again, there's just over $122 million worth of revenue that we collect through the fees for solid waste. Again, as a reminder, prior to the 2025 budget, the solid waste program was kind of funded a part of it through the property taxes, which was your waste diversion, and then a part of it through the garbage collection, which was on the rate side, a separate rate on the rate bill or on the property tax bill. Now with the approval of the solid waste long range financial plan in June, all fees are now transitioned over to a fee structure. So when you look at the fee structure for solid waste, you do see a big increase, but that's partially because of prior to 2025, there was a big component that was collected within the property tax envelope. Now that's fully transitioned over to the fee structure. So that's why you see that there. The solid waste budget is fully aligned to the solid waste long range financial plan. If you recall, in June, we talked about 2025, a requirement of a 17% increase for solid waste, with a caveat that we would revisit that through the budget cycle to kind of scale that in. Over the 10-year term of the long range financial plan, the average annual increase was at 5.4%. So it's a little bit of a spike and kind of a fluid up and down throughout the plan. Through the directions report, that was adjusted to 7% for 2025. So again, as opposed to doing that significant peak in 2025, we're kind of slowly kind of building up. So we'll still achieve the overall objectives of the plan over a 10-year time frame. Next slide, please. On the capital side, so again, 2 components of the capital. The bulk of this capital program is in solid waste. And those obviously those are relatively capital intensive programs, specifically on the capping side of the trail and solid waste dumping locations. On the environment side, those are mainly 3 components: climate change budget, which is increasing to $6 million this round. We have a $2 million natural acquisition fund, and then we have just over $2.8 million for the beam team. Next slide, please. On this slide, so basically this is how do we pay for this capital? So the capital is paid through, almost 50-50, not quite, reserves and debt. So again, we make contributions into our various reserves, and then we kind of draw out from the reserves on an annual basis to kind of fund the different capital programs. Again, if you refer to the budget capital funding summary, we provide a detailed list of all the funding components and where that is allocated. And this is the mixture that you see for this component of the budget. I will now pass it over to my colleagues to go to the next slide.
Thanks, Earl. Good morning. So I'm here to speak to the 2025 draft budget for forestry services and also for solid waste services. And I also want to acknowledge Allison Downs and Shelley McDonald, the directors for those respective areas that are also available to answer some of the questions after the presentation. Donc, pour commencer, le service des
First of all,
forestiers dispose d'un budget annuel.
the Service Forestry has about $22 million in budget. We have the strategic priority of the council. We want to be a green and resilient city. We want to protect our canopy. We have about 10,000 hectares of forest and 25,000 trees on streets.
Focus the presentation on 2 components, one related to the maintenance of our existing trees, and then also the second part related to the planting of new trees. So $14.4 million of the $22 million budget is allocated in 2025 to maintain our existing trees and forests. So this is for functions such as pruning, stumping, watering, and our tree protection. And because we've seen an increase in terms of number of trees that we need to maintain, both in our parks and also along of our roads, and also the impact of recent severe events, part of the budget identifies 2 additional tree workers to be able to keep up with our, try to keep up with our maintenance quality standards. When it comes to the tree planting side, the 2025 budget includes 1.9 million for our existing tree planting programs. That's a Trees and Trust, Parks and Streetscaping Planning, the Schoolyard Tree Planting Program, Community Tree Planting, the Reforestation Projects, and the Green Acres Program. I did want to highlight a few of the new programs that were rolled out and approved by committee and council earlier this year as part of our tree planting early actions. And one of them is the kind of rebranded tree dedication program. So this will allow basically through the dedication process starting in 2025 is more trees to be planted through that program. It is based on a cost recovery model and there's no incremental funding pressure identified through this budget. So because of any administrative elements are really being absorbed within our existing operations. When it comes to the proactive tree replacement program that was approved by committee and council, there's 500,000 that's been identified through the Capital Climate Change and Resiliency Fund that will allow us to essentially kickstart that proactive program by planting 500 additional trees this fall. And our intent is year over year, we're going to see an increase of that 500 to eventually the objective of 2,000 additional street trees. Because we're also seeing an increase in terms of resource requirements to support that program. There is 1 tree inspector or forestry inspector that is part of the budget that was also identified as part of the tree planting strategy that committee and council approved earlier this year. I also want to highlight the 3rd program that we are rolling out is a private tree planting program. I know that this was one that was certainly well received by committee and council. It will be rolling out in 2025. You're not seeing a budget pressure related to that because we're actually leveraging existing funds that we already have. And we're going to be leveraging that probably for the next couple of years before we start to identify a budget pressure. Donc, ces programmes sont,
So all of these programs and initiatives are very important. We want to be able to have a good canopy within the city of Ottawa. We want to have a good canopy within our urban zones.
Next slide. So from a solid waste perspective, the total operating net budget for solid waste is 126 million. And as Cyril explained, we're seeing a major shift right now in terms of the how the program is being funded overall. So as Cyril indicated, we're moving from a combination of rate and tax based to a fully fee based. So this is basically the first year of transition. But just to put in context, as Cyril indicated, basically the 7% is kind of the net effect in terms of what people are going to be paying more compared to the previous year. Everything that's in the budget for the solid waste is aligned with the solid waste master plan and the long range financial plan that was approved by council earlier this year. I do want to highlight a couple of elements related to that budget. One is you will see some fairly significant capital expenditures, one of 19 million for enhancements at the Trail Road facility. So it still very much is an active landfill. There's still a lot of work to be done in terms of closure, in terms of expanding our landfill gas management systems, and also continue to improve basically or enhance how we're controlling odors at the facility. I do also want to highlight some of the great work that's being done by the team. It may not show up in the budget, but it certainly alleviates some of the budget pressures that we're identifying. Is through 2024, we've been able to leverage about 2.5 million in leveraging existing resources that we have that otherwise we would have to go out and contract and procure. 1.3 million of that is to use basically sand that we have on our existing facilities to be able to use for some of the capping material at the landfill. And the other one is to leverage the the composting facility that we have at Barnesdale to be able to turn that into topsoil that we're also able to use on the landfill site. So that's a savings of 1.2, and that's strictly just in 2024 that we would have otherwise have had to procure externally. So, and we anticipate similar savings of that magnitude in the upcoming year. So certainly something worth noting. Part of the budget also includes 1.5 million for increased waste diversion program. Again, this is aligned with the solid waste master plan. 900,000 of that is for parks diversion programs. I know that all of the councillors have indicated how these programs are important to them. So our commitment to you is we're going to be coming back in 2025 with a plan in terms of how we're going to be rolling that out. So this is not about piloting. We're beyond the pilot stage. This is going to be about, okay, how are we more broadly rolling out parks diversion in parks? And it's not going to be one size fits all. We're not all going to get there in 1 year, but certainly we're going to be working with you in terms of how we're going to start to see more appropriate containers in our parks. Et finalement, le budget identifie
And to
11
finish, we do need
positions dans le budget.
11 full-time employees, equivalent employees.
9 of those 11 positions that are in the budget are currently temporary positions that we have. 4 of those are actually to support our parks collection program. The budget ask is to be able to convert those from temporary positions to full-time positions. And we also have 2 incremental positions to help to support the implementation of the solid waste master plan. So with that, I will hand it over to Debbie Stewart, the GM of Strategic Initiatives.
Next slide. And next slide. Thank you. Good morning. Thank you, Alain. So as Alain mentioned, I'm Debbie Stewart. I'm the new General Manager of Strategic Initiatives, which is also a new department. I'm happy to be here to talk to you about and provide a little bit more detail than what Cyril did with regards to the climate change and resiliency budget. Just a quick note that Will McDonald, the interim director of that service area, who you are all quite familiar with, is here as well to support you and to answer your questions. So the 2025 draft budget continues Ottawa's commitment to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and enhancing climate resiliency. The investments in this draft budget will continue the city's efforts to transition to a clean, renewable, and resilient community by 2050. Le budget préliminaire de 2025
In this budget, we want to invest in some initiatives that will allow us to reach our objectives in the master plan in climate change. So for the implementation of this plan, we went from $5 to $6 million in this year's budget. At the same time, we increased the rural budget to $2 million. This follows up the city objectives in terms of heritage. We want to avoid any type of net loss in humid lands.
The most significant impact actually comes from our continued work to integrate the climate lens across all departments. This is the 3rd consecutive year that through the budget, a climate lens has been applied, and this builds on the baseline when this was first started in 2023. So overall, in this draft budget, 217 capital projects were rated as having a climate impact. And of these, there were 22 projects or initiatives that were identified as having a moderate or major impact in terms of our climate goals. And in total, those 22 projects are worth $375 million in new investments. This is a significant investment. The majority of the investment, or $306 million, will go towards the replacement of the existing 40-foot buses with a new fleet of zero-emission buses. And this is a major contribution towards the electrification of transportation and to energy evolution. And I'd like to point out, just as a final remark, that the $375 million investment is an increase of almost $100 million over last year. And it's more than 7 times the total investment of $52 million that we saw when we did this exercise in 2023. We're really proud about the cross department efforts that are happening to see these investments realized. And I will turn it back to Cyril and move to the next slide, please.
Thank you, Debbie. So now we're going to move on to the rate side of the budget. So in this budget, this is again where you see the water, wastewater and stormwater. So overall, we have a gross budget of 532 million. So again, same idea with the recoveries and allocations to the capital programs. Now this one, because this is the rate program, this one is fully recovered from the rate fees. So your utility bills for water, wastewater and stormwater. That's why you see the net requirement of 0. So basically at the end of the day, any net plus or minus, we also do contributions into the 3 reserves because this program is a very capital intensive program. So we build those reserves up and then we draw them down depending on the peaks and valleys of the significant infrastructure, which I'll speak to a little bit later. Overall, there's 13 new FTEs coming from this budget. We have 3 in water, 8 in wastewater, and then 2 additional in the stormwater. Overall, from a capital perspective, again, as I mentioned, very capital intensive program. There's 91 projects overall, and we kind of break that down in terms of the impacts to the climate change as you see before you. Next slide, please. This one basically breaks down the budget by the 3 services. So again, for the 2025 budget, this is built as per the directions and as per the long-range financial plan for rate. That which says that for 2025, the water increase will be 2%, wastewater increase at 3%, and then the stormwater at 12%. So that budget again is built based on the approved long-range financial plan for rate and the directions that was before you back in September. Next slide, please. This is basically a breakdown of the capital program. So significant investments in the renewal side. So again, it kind of ties right back to the capital intensive nature of this program. We do have some big investments in the wastewater side for growth. We do have the biggest significant investment for 2025 is the ROPEC expansion and the anaerobic digestion. So if you look at the details, you'll see that's the biggest component of the single one project for the wastewater for this program. Next slide, please. And then basically, this is basically how this is funded through the different development charges, reserves, and debt. What I will bring to your attention here is not here in this slide deck, but it's in part of the transmittal report and part of the budget documentations. From a rate perspective, our debt threshold level of service, our debt servicing threshold is at 15%. For 2025, we are at 11.7%. So again, we're well within the council directed 15% threshold. I'll now pass it over to Tammy to walk through the next slides.
Merci Cyril. Bonjour Monsieur le Président, les membres du
Hello,
comité.
everyone.
Nous sommes heureux ici
Committee members.
pour vous présenter le budget pour
We
le
want to
service
present you the budget for the drinking water, wastewater, and rainwater. I'm the director of this service within the City of Ottawa.
So starting with drinking water services. So the service is responsible for the production and distribution of high quality drinking water. Using the Ottawa River as its source, an average of 275 million liters of drinking water is produced daily between the 2 drinking water treatment plants of Britannia and Lemieux, which runs 365 days a year, 24/7. From these facilities, water is pumped through a complex network of approximately 3,000 kilometers of water mains to just over 950,000 customers. Several of the rural villages, including Carp, Vars, and parts of Richmond, are serviced by communal well systems that are also owned and operated by the city and have the same regulatory standards as the city's central system. Les investissements dans les services d'eau potable appuient la priorité.
We're going to be investing in drinking water. This follows the council's priority.
2025 budget for drinking water services includes $54.5 million for the renewal of drinking water assets. In there, we have a snapshot of $9.5 million for water system improvements in our water distribution side. We also have rehabilitation at $8 million for the water mains and through other condition assessment programs. We also have investments in our supervisory control and data acquisition, also known as our SCADA system, at $7.4 million. The drinking water services budget also includes $31 million of investment to support growth, where we are expanding the Carlington Heights Pump Station with $15.5 million, upgrading Ottawa South Pump Station at $14.2 million, and also looking to increase the capacity of the Carp Well system at $877,000. Ces investissements liés à la croissance nous permettent de
This is linked to the growth. We want to be able to provide high-quality drinking water.
Those FTEs will support new legislative requirements and increasing maintenance requirements as well. In the service review and continuous improvement sections, our department is always looking for ways to streamline our work, leverage technology, and continuously improve our operation. Both water purification plants have a hydro optimization strategy that result in annual savings of $500,000. We also have a comprehensive condition assessment program for our large water mains. The program allows staff to proactively identify any issues or concerns with the large diameter pipes and can be addressed in a planned and controlled fashion, limiting impacts to customers. We also continue to explore new technologies as they become available on the market, and we are currently piloting the use of artificial intelligence in proactively identifying leakage in our water distribution system. Next slide, please. Next, we'll talk about our wastewater services. We can move on to the next slide. So wastewater services is responsible for the management, operation, and maintenance of the wastewater collection system and the one wastewater treatment plant. The assets include over 6,000 kilometers of pipes, 90,000 maintenance holes, 100,000 catch basins, and 1,600 stormwater outfalls. Management of the system also includes the operation of 85 facilities, including sanitary and stormwater pumping stations. We have combined sewage regulators and storage facilities, odor control, and of course, the wastewater treatment plant that we call ROPEC. The 2025 rate budget includes significant investments in the city's wastewater system, with $79.8 million for the renewal of the wastewater assets. Within that portfolio, $30 million will be invested in sewage treatment rehab work, $6.8 million for sewage pump station rehab, $3.1 million for the wet weather infrastructure program, and $2 million for the improvements of the sewage system, collection system. The budget also includes $144.6 million to support growth, including, as Cyril mentioned earlier in his presentation, $127 million for the expansion of the digesters at ROPEC. We also have $11.7 million for pump station capacity increases, and also looking to increase capacity at the Richmond pump station at $3.6 million, all to accommodate anticipated new development for that village. The draft rate budget also includes $17.4 million for water and sewer only projects, which creates efficiency in construction projects by addressing buried infrastructure at the same time. The wastewater draft budget includes 8 new FTEs, mainly to support some regulatory changes and increasing maintenance at the water treatment plant and the pump stations. In terms of continuous improvement, we have efforts to optimize hydro usage also at ROPEC, the use of biogas as an energy source, and it does avoid the use of electricity at peak times, contribute to annual savings of about $1 million. Staff have also been working actively on the ROPEC master plan to develop a comprehensive infrastructure renewal plan for the plant that balances growth, rehabilitation, and reinvestment while maximizing the use and value of the current asset. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Maintenant, nous allons parler des services des eaux pluviales.
We'll now talk about stormwater services responsible for the management of facilities, labs, and drainage system.
For stormwater includes $31.4 million for renewal of stormwater assets, which includes $15.5 million in drainage culvert works at over 150 locations across the city, $3.9 million in stormwater and surface water rehab work, and $1.5 million in linear stormwater system improvements. $434,000 is allocated allocated for floodplain mapping to produce updated maps. The draft budget also includes 2 FTEs to support regulatory changes in our laboratory work and also to support maintenance. We also have enhanced communications to council and residents during extreme rainfall events, with messaging being released in preparation of a storm, connecting councillors and residents with the available resources and steps to protect themselves and respond to urban flooding concerns. Our stormwater team is always seeking continuous drainage improvements across the system to reduce surface flooding, and those efforts will continue. Next slide, please. Finally, we also have a tax component in our department, mainly the operating budgets for our infrastructure services and our asset management. Can I get the next slide, please? So Environment and Climate Change Committee is responsible for approving these operating budgets, which also fall in our department. Asset management maintains the city's asset inventory, undertakes performance assessments, inspections, and develops risk-based renewal strategies and define these investment needs for all of the municipal infrastructure valued at $70 billion. Infrastructure Services also leads the delivery of new and renewed municipal infrastructure projects funded through both the city budget and federal and provincial stimulus programs, while ensuring industry standards and guidelines are met. Infrastructure Services leads approximately $700 million worth in projects every year. The projects are inclusive of all capital projects, including water, wastewater, storm, roads, structures, sidewalks, culverts, parks, facilities, etc. Asset Management's building portfolio also includes $2.9 million in energy management investments. That portfolio has a mandate to support renewal work at all city facilities. The operating budgets for asset management and infrastructure services include several FTEs to support the critical work of both services. In infrastructure services, we currently have 12 temporary positions that we are asking for the conversion from temporary to permanent. They address growing infrastructure project needs related to growth and aging infrastructure. And in asset management, we are asking for 4 FTEs to address provincial legislative changes around the asset management regulation, also supporting transit structures and the ROPEC master plan. In terms of continuous improvement, staff have developed a host of new practices and procedures in response to the province's excess soil regulation to ensure regulatory compliance, maintenance of continuity of service, and to plan for and monitor and mitigate cost-related risks affecting the capital project delivery. Next slide, please. C'est la fin de notre présentation aujourd'hui.
This is the end of our presentation. Thank you for your time, and we are at your disposal to answer your questions.
Thanks very much for that presentation. So we're going to move to delegations, but before we do that, I just want to make sure that Vice Chair Carr is able to read in the roadmap motions. So these are long motions, but they are necessary for on the tax supported and rate supported side. So Vice Chair Carr, I'll ask you to just read those in. Thanks.
Mr. Chair, we just had to make a quick edit to the roadmap motion to reflect the revised page that we received. So if we can do that after the delegations, it would be appreciated.
Yeah, okay. So we'll move to delegations instead, and then we'll read those in afterwards. So our first delegation is Angela Keller-Herzog. Angela, you're welcome at the front here. Just right there beside Cyril.
All right. Good morning, everybody. My name is Angela Keller-Herzog, and I'm the Executive Director of Cafes. My presentation will focus on the Climate Change Master Plan and the municipal budget. Next slide, please. So Cafes is a network of local environment and climate leaders known to most of you. Next slide, please. This is the overview of my presentation, and I'm going to dive right in the interest of time, as there's quite a lot of stuff. Next slide, please. So this is an important slide. So the budget context, the Climate Change Master Plan, CCMP, is for 2020 to 2025. So that means that this budget we're looking at is the last year of this master plan. So our questions are the projects completed? In which case we don't need a budget. Have we abandoned the projects in case we don't need a budget? Or do we need a boost to complete the projects? Or what are the priorities? What extra resources might be needed? So council is supposed to receive annual climate change master plan updates as well as emission reports. These are way overdue. It's been well over a year, April 2023, that there was an update and the climate change master plan was not on track. This term of council has never received an emissions inventory. So I think the situation is not good, and we basically have not enough information on the programs to approve or not approve this budget. Next slide, please. So we're basically in the dark. And when I say we, I mean council as well as the public. Next slide, please. Some of the questions that we might have about the CCMP is in the area of energy retrofitting. We know the Better Homes program is functioning, but is it self-financing at this point? What about the commercial counterpart? Is hydro taking that over? Municipal buildings, what are the deliverables? Where are we at? Next slide, please. In terms of electrification of vehicles, there was a whole bunch of deliverables. What's the status? In terms of organic waste, is the CCMP engaging on that or not? Next slide, please. So there's too many unknowns. Another big question that we have is whether we have the resources to plan the climate change master plan for 2026 to 2030. We have a new general manager who's here with us today. We have an incoming new director for the climate change resiliency unit. Are we setting these folks up for success? Our recommendation is to earmark one or more FTEs to plan the next cycle of CCMP in 2025, and that needs to be in this budget. Next slide, please. Looking forward, we need the climate program to be actions that people can relate to, that matter to residents. So I'm going to pop through the next few slides to give you 6 climate issues that we think in the community that matter. Trees. Did you know that budget 2025 is talking about a 20 to 30% cut in the number of trees that we're going to plant? The mayor had said we should double it. Next slide, please. Heat. Heat kills. So we think that the Better Homes program is great, but we think it needs an extension. Heat pumps for buildings with no air conditioning, and especially a heat pump program for tenants. We think that renters need to be included in climate action. Next slide, please. Okay, so this slide is about keeping the lights on. It has quite a lot of information on it. It's a huge issue in terms of financial heft. So the City of Toronto, just to give you an idea, Toronto Hydro has now a very recently approved 5-year, $5.1 billion investment plan for their grid modernization, operation, and decarbonization. The draft climate resiliency strategy that we have here in Ottawa has very little to say about energy resiliency. Our recommendation is that this critical area needs budgeted human resources. We think there's a real gap right now here in our climate team. Next slide, please. In terms of really understanding how the energy transition is going to work technically and giving the support the city needs to give to Ottawa Hydro, whose rate rate application plan is going to be this coming spring. It's very important. So let's see, how do we build in Ottawa? Huge question that we've talked a lot about before. We think that there's a sweet spot where we can have better building at lower operating costs for more affordable homes. And there are outstanding motions to staff asking for work on this, and we don't know what the progress is. Next slide, please. Residential basement flooding, huge vulnerability for so many residents. Next slide, please. Organic waste. We, from having reviewed the budget documents, think the solid waste master plan is pretty much broke. They're running a deficit in their reserves. So can the climate change master plan help out? Community support is strong, and organics turning into methane emissions from the landfill is obviously our third most important climate issue. Next slide, please. So that's my last slide. It summarizes our recommendations. We think the committee should call for a December 2024 meeting to get an update on the CCMP and an emissions inventory so that you have the information that you need. We think you should earmark money for resources to plan the next cycle of climate change master plan. And going forward, we think we need pragmatic climate actions that Ottawa residents can relate to. I'll end there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Angela, for your presentation. Councillor Hill has a question for you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Angela, for the presentation. I think I heard loud and clear here in your recommendations. You're concerned, especially given some of the change in staffing and process over the last year in the cell here, that we're making the progress in the right direction at the right time and such. And if I'm correct in that, I'll definitely ask some questions on that, because I do think the public are entitled to have some good information on the roadmap that we have to move forward on our environment portfolio, climate change master plan, energy evolution, and the whole Monty. So I just want to make sure I understand that you've got a concern with regards to essentially the accountability on the city's part with regard to our programming for those programs. Yes?
Yes. We understand that there have been transitions in staffing. So with that in view, with like new management coming in, is actually a really good time to kind of take stock. Where are we at? And we think that, well, I know that in the community, there's keen interest to find out some of the answers to the questions and more. I think that council also needs and deserves this information. And I think that it would be a really good time to put in an extra environment committee meeting to receive those updates.
Okay, thank you very much, Angela. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you very much. Hi. So in terms of the heat pumps, which are more and more popular, I should mention that Ottawa Community Housing is already doing that in the new builds, and individual ones for each unit actually is happening at Mikinak, which is quite amazing. You could come out and see it sometime. But in terms of trying to push that, I'm going to have to ask staff this, but I don't know what our power is to enforce that outside of our own affordable. But Ottawa Community Housing is going that direction, but I don't believe you can, this would be building code, and certainly we'd want to enforce that. We have the only regulation I know is maximum and low minimum temperatures in a unit. So I don't know how we would enforce installing heat pumps, so we certainly would encourage it.
If I may, I think the proposal might be not so much that we enforce, but that we offer the opportunity for incentive and proactive actions also to renters. I think that technology has been evolving. I know that the city of New York is doing a big, I think, bulk order of like apartment size heat pumps that can either be installed with the compressor on the balcony or even just like hanging out the window in the old style air conditioner configuration. So the technology is coming along. And then what we could realize is energy savings for renters, particularly the ones that are living in buildings where they have separate billing, and especially any buildings that are heated by resistance electric heat, which is very expensive.
Okay, thank you. In terms of capturing energy, do you think we should be doing better in terms of solar, for example? I was looking at those pictures of the water purification plants and wondering, why don't we have solar panels on that? And I'll ask staff about that. They're right out there. But just, in general terms, are you aware of other projects that are using more solar or wind?
So the technology, again, is getting cheaper and cheaper, and also more energy efficient. I'm aware that, and I think you are aware, Councillor Kavanagh, that I think in 2022, there was a motion to put solar panels on 3 municipal buildings, preceded by an assessment of the suitability of municipal building roofs for solar, and also accompanied by a strategy for distributed energy resources. That is another one of these things that seems to have disappeared in terms of the radar. I am aware informally that quite a lot of struggle and work was done. So I think that there's probably like a base of learning, including maybe the building assessments that could be built on quite easily.
These are questions we can ask staff. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Vice Chair Carr.
Yeah, thanks very much, Angela. More of a comment than a question, I suspect. First of all, thank you very much for all the work that you did with respect to the session you organized with city staff on storm and sanitary backwater valves and sump pumps recently. It was an amazing session Jim Durrell organized in conjunction with staff and yourself, and tremendous input that's very valuable. I just wanted to comment, I can appreciate the frustration with the not seeing the CCMP update and the emissions update. I believe I know we ask these questions a lot ourselves. I believe that we're expecting the CCMP update in first quarter of next year, and its emissions update, I think, is supposed to come next month, was it? So they are on radar, but we'll confirm with staff. But thank you very much always for your input, and I'm sure we'll talk offline shortly.
Thank you.
Yeah, and certainly just want to echo the comments of the Vice Chair, and thank you very much for your work. There's been a lot of progress, certainly, but I think there's a lot coming in 2025 that you're rightfully pointing out that is a need. Things like the HPDS, the resiliency strategy, the tree planting ramp up is in higher needs areas, and the planting that's going to be along the row in that right of way. So certainly going to be a need to get more trees planted. It's not always the easiest. You can plant them a lot in kind of clear areas, but where there's already built up areas, that's where the focus is gonna be. And then on the heat pumps, agree with you on the renting side. The Better Homes Loan Program does a great job, but on the rental side, that's something that I know Acorn and others have been advocating for. So just wanted to say appreciate your comments, and there's a lot of work to come. We'll ask staff during the question period. I know the emissions inventory is on the agenda very, very soon, the next couple of months, as well as progress reports that you've mentioned. So just appreciate you being here, and you've definitely been heard here today. So thanks, Angela. All right, our next delegation is Paul Tulloch, who's a consultant, senior data scientist, meter methane ML project, Stanford University. Paul, you've got 5 minutes with us, I think, online.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, great. Are my slides up? I don't know if they are or not. Okay, there.
They have just been put up there. There you go.
Okay, I'm working at a different level right now. I'm more at a global level right now. But at the same time, I'm also studying cities and methane mitigation across the world. So I live in Ottawa. So although I'm work with Stanford, I'm here in Ottawa with you. So I recently developed the first ever AI generated global landfill database, and it was used to task the Tanager methane satellite that Carbon Mapper recently launched in August. We're working within a partnership of Planet Labs, Carbon Mapper, Rocky Mountain Institute, and some others. Next slide. I can't really see the slides, so I'm hoping it's there.
You're good. It's
So
there.
I just want to briefly touch on global methane and where things are at in understanding it and the global plan to address it, and then bring it down to where we're at the city of Ottawa, or at least an overview. So greenhouse gases are made up of CO2 and methane. And methane specifically is something that I've been working on, and it's a larger problem than CO2, but it's also an opportunity. One, methane molecules have a short lifespan of 7 to 12 years in the atmosphere, whereas CO2 is hundreds of years. So it presents a window of opportunity that once you eliminate an emission, in 7 years to 10 years, it's gone out of the atmosphere. However, in the case of methane, it's about 30 times increase in the global warming potential over CO2. So it is a gas that we have to focus on. And so the COP29 meeting that's going on right now in Azerbaijan, the message out of COP28 was we have to start reducing methane, and COP29's message is reduce methane emissions. It opens a longer term window to tackle CO2. Next slide. So the methane emission sources and trends, currently they're still on the rise. After in the mid 2010s and 2000s, there was a plateauing. However, lately the increase in methane emissions has increased from 1/2 to 2/3 of related to human activity. Major sources are landfills, agriculture, and mainly beef production, oil and gas production from venting and leaks in the infrastructure, coal production from mines and storage sites. Just having coal lying in a large pile can produce methane, and of course, wastewater. The actual percentages of each, that's a tricky one to say. There's a lot of leading estimates. I would say landfills are about 30%, and agriculture 40%, and the oil and gas, coal, and wastewater make up the rest. Next slide. So one of the things we've been doing at the global level is combining and building a new satellite array of various satellite providers that can detect methane. So for example, Carbon Mapper recently launched their methane detector. And at Stanford, we've been building this global meter infrastructure database that tracks most methane infrastructure from oil and gas to landfills to whatever other sources. Next slide. I'm trying to hurry up here. So there's a new array of satellites being developed. So there's EMIT data from the International Space Station, the Pleiades, which is the European Space Agency, GHGSat, which is a private company in Canada. They provide point source estimates. MethaneSat recently launched from the Environmental Defense Fund, a basin level methane detector, which is basically focusing on oil and gas infrastructure across the world. And then Tanager 1, the one that I've been working with, is the Planet Labs and Carbon Mapper. It's a point source estimate and will be open sourcing all its data probably in 2025 or 26, somewhere in that for some. Also, East Asia has their methane detection array as well. Next slide. So when you take that methane detection capacity and you develop it with the ground truth, which we built at Stanford, which I led the project on WasteNext AI Global Landfill Detector, we basically put in 400 million images provided by Planet Lab satellite imagery, and we detected over 8,500 new waste sites. And when we combine that with known waste sites, we've created a new database. Next slide. So data in action. the end result is we're trying to get to a system that in near real time, we can detect methane sources and then attribute it to the ground truth, like what's going on the ground. And then through that, identify. So here's an example. Carbon Mapper recently detected 4 landfills in Brazil that presented about 7% of their entire solid waste methane emissions. And that'll become more prevalent across the globe as time rolls forward. So there's a new accountability. Next slide. The strategic framework for global action. So there's a political formation through COP28.
Paul, I'll
UN,
just
global
ask
trade
you
mark-
to please finish up. Your time's up. So just last comment and we'll see if there's questions for you.
Okay, well, I wanted to just get to the Ottawa Methane Mitigation Action Plan. So my preliminary view of the pros and cons of the Ottawa Mitigation Action Plan. So there's a large investment in infrastructure and collection for residential green bin diversion of organic matter. The new regulation banning organic matter from landfills is a great step forward. Land gas capture and biogas extraction need to review and assess those, but you've made some large steps forwards in that. The cons are, I would say, the green bin usage is underutilized and there's a lack of soft skill investment. There's a low proportion of multi-dwelling green bin collection, and there's a real gap in the regulation and even the data for restaurant and grocery store organic waste. And my last slide.
Thank you. Actually, Paul, I'll just, I do want to get to those recommendations. You've got a lot of important information here. It's helpful. Councillor, Vice Chair Carr has a question for you. So hopefully some of that can come out and I might have a question for you as well. So I appreciate you being here. Is this helpful? Councillor Carr.
Hi, Paul. Thanks very much for coming out. Appreciated. I'll ask you a question and perhaps some of those last points in the slide will be part of the answer. So what are the best practices you've seen in other cities in terms of minimizing those methane emissions through the green bin program that we could apply here?
Well, I think in the case of Ottawa, we've spent a lot of money on rolling out hardware. And, we've got top notch compared to, like, I've looked at over been going through 4,000 cities across the planet. And, we're right at the top when it comes to spending on infrastructure to divert organic matter. The problem is the uptake of the green bin program. So the soft skills, and this is low hanging fruit because, you spend, I don't know how many hundreds of millions of dollars putting the green bin program in place, but the actual use by residents, it needs work. And, when we looked at some other countries like Germany and Japan, organic diversion is almost part of their culture. So there's a culture change that needs to be addressed, not just hardware and not just capital costs. So I think there's a missing component there that it's low hanging fruit. If we can address that, you can turn Ottawa into a leader at the global level. And that's my next slides. But anyways, I won't go to the next slide. But I do think there's also some work on the restaurant and grocery industry. I have read in your report that, it's not, there's limited regulatory and there's restrictions there over these two industries. But I do think that in the times of food price inflation, there's many new opportunities that arise. But I think it starts with data and investigation. So I recommend, at least doing a new action plan to look at accelerating green bin usage. And I do think there's a new focal point for COM strategy directly linking methane to green bin usage. I think that's missing because, that's people wonder, how can I participate in climate change mitigation? And I think green bin is a missing component in that. And I also just, my last point, there's 3%, according to my calculations, the current budget and climate environment being spent on these initiatives. But given the, residents' fear and dangers of climate change, I think there's a spending misalignment and priorities. And a lot of that spending is actually on flood prevention and not climate change mitigation. So there's an issue there. Can I go to my next slide? Because I just
Paul,
want to
Paul,
leave a couple of.
sorry, Paul, just 1 second. Vice Chair Carr is going to just finish up and then
Okay.
I have a quick question for you.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks very much. Appreciate that. I think we have an audit coming back that includes the green bin, I believe, in the next few months. But anyway, look forward to continuing discussions. Thank you. I'll turn you over to the chair.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. So just, I mean, on your basic recommendations, just succinctly, what would you recommend the city do at this time? You've seen our new solid waste master plan. You've seen obviously a big push to get the green bin into multi-residential and to get people to use that more often, the new bag limits. What is your recommendation to committee today?
I think you need to develop a new action plan for accelerating green bin usage and to roll out and combine it with your new limits on waste collection at curbside. So, there's an opportunity to start filling up those green bins rather than complaining about we have a 3-bin limit or 3-item limit on. So I think there's an opportunity to combine all the change that's going on and rolling it into green bin and promoting that more.
Thank you very much and appreciate the presentation and particularly the focus on methane. Thank you very much, sir. Our next delegation up is William Van Geest, Interim Executive Director with Ecology Ottawa. William's here in person with us. You've got 5 minutes to address committee. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Chair. I can go ahead. Thanks so much. And thank you, committee, for the opportunity to address you. So it took a little bit of work to be here today. The draft 2020-25 budget in all its hundreds of pages was tabled at last Wednesday's council meeting just 4 business days ago. Given the budget is council's most important annual exercise and the tax supported budget alone is over 300 million, that is before us today. That's not much time, whether for advocacy groups or even yourselves. But even within the hundreds of pages available, it's tough to make heads or tails of much of this budget. On one hand, we're offered a small amount of somewhat rigorous information, a few spreadsheets with generic categories like materials and services, salaries, and in the climate spreadsheet, climate change and resiliency, admittedly quite general. On the other hand, in the budget magazine, we're offered a few scattered dollar figures for various initiatives. How exactly do these relate? There's not too many indications. I mention these aspects because advocacy groups have for years been calling for improvements to the budget process. A number of these groups are those of the People's Official Plan Coalition, of which Ecology Ottawa is a member. In a letter to council last year, this coalition's 26 groups asked for earlier consultations, meaningful performance indicators, better connections between departments, a citizen working group on budget, and so on. These recommendations have largely gone unincorporated, and here we are with some recurring frustrations. Ottawans want to engage deeply on the budget. Despite these challenges, we do have a few comments on the budget information available. First of all, the allocation for implementing the CCMP Climate Change Master Plan has increased to $6 million. This is another step in the right direction. Does it respond adequately to the climate emergency, which Council declared in 2019? Given that energy evolution calls for annual investments in the hundreds of millions, it would seem like not. And sure enough, at last check, only 2 of the plan's 8 priorities are on track. And 2025, as a previous delegate pointed out, is the last year in the CCMP's horizon. It would be disappointing, to say nothing of a reneging on our own commitments, if Ottawa failed to attain its own goals in this crucial crisis. Second, this is the 3rd budget in which a climate lens is applied. The intent here is obviously good, but the current model is flawed. It only records spending that will reduce emissions. What about spending that will increase emissions? This exercise loses substantial meaning if both aren't accounted for. There are a few other measures in the budget that are clearly on the right track. Investments in streetscaping projects for shade and increased rainfall. To whatever extent these involve nature-based solutions, these are great. And although we'd love to know a little bit more about the information in the draft budget. Investments in floodplain mapping with conservation authorities, also very positive, including mapping of the most severe flooding expected with climate change. Funds for green space acquisition. We were very impressed by the recent purchase of over 550 hectares of wetlands near Taywin, and this acquisition should be continued, although we didn't urge the development of interpretive features to educate Ottawans on the rich biodiversity preserved in these areas. And then also investments in the solid waste master plan, particularly for waste diversion. We assume the numbers in the budget include the community grants that over 200 Ottawans asked for via our petition earlier this year. But we'd love to see that, that breakdown. Our final request today, trees. In his mayoral campaign, Mayor Sutcliffe promised to plant 1 million trees during his term. The tree planting strategy's early actions proposed earlier this year seeks only to keep up with tree loss in the right of way. Funds should be provided so that these actions' 3-year horizon can be cut in at least half. Trees are one of our best defenses against climate change, whether for mitigation or for resilience, and the return on investment is almost unbeatable. Particularly with the equity analyses proposed in the early actions, we'll know exactly where to put them, and we shouldn't wait. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, William. Appreciate that delegation and certainly the calls for on the transparency side and more action for next year. I'm not seeing questions. Oh, okay, Councillor Brockington, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your delegation this morning. Just I noted, well, I noted many things that you'd mentioned, but the comment about the budget talking about which initiatives reduce emissions, but is silent on those that increase. Has Ecology Ottawa had time to do any analysis to identify initiatives where there'll be a net increase in emissions?
Yeah, the big one I think is the road widenings that we see. We know from the phenomenon of induced demand that will simply bring more cars on the road and more emissions from that. I think we could probably talk about the procurement for concrete and all the embedded emissions in there. I think probably across the board on capital expenditures, that analysis should be done. Yeah, I'd love to follow up with a few other possible areas on that.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Thanks for being here, William.
Thank you.
Okay, our next delegation is Letita Charbonneau.
Hello.
Online. Yes. Hi there. You've got 5 minutes to address committee.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to share my concerns in relation to the budget and the climate change master plan. As you all know, that's Ottawa's guide for mitigating and adapting to climate change between 2020 and 2025. The plan outlines key actions like achieving net zero emissions by 2050, which is too late, creating a climate resiliency strategy, and applying a climate lens to the official plan. I'd like to thank staff here today for all their efforts. However, as just an ordinary citizen, it seems to me that the city is actually at a standstill when it comes to implementing any of these actions. And of course, this is reflected in the budget. In June, the auditor's report made it very clear that the city is not allocating sufficient resources for mitigation or resiliency measures. Energy Evolution, for example, came without any funding commitments whatsoever, and the CCMP has received only $5 million in the last 2 budgets. This year's budget does not increase this sufficiently either. $6 million sounds like a lot, but it's not. It's a drop in the bucket compared to what's needed. We are looking at more and more costly impacts of climate change. So it really is a matter of paying now or paying a lot more later. I understand that in today's political climate, it takes a courageous city council to put forth the motions needed to deal with climate change in a responsible and realistic way. But there seems to be a portion of council that is reluctant to acknowledge this. I would never go as far as to say that we have councillors that are climate deniers, no. But there are certainly climate action delayers on council. When it comes to staff roles and responsibilities, the lack of resources and direction is evident. I'm amazed at how rarely climate change measures are on the agenda of even this committee. I know money is tight, but that is in large part because of the minimal tax increases over the past many years, which have meant cuts to services and lack of funding for transit and climate change measures. This year's increase seems no different. It's an increase, yes, but nowhere near enough to make up for the years we did not keep up with inflation. We have one of the lowest tax rates in the country, but also the most expensive public transit fares. What message does that send? I'm certain that Council cares about the impacts of climate change on Ottawa citizens. But why is funding Lansdowne 2.0 seen as more important than climate change impacts? I was most interested in the auditor's findings that the city's climate team is too temporary. 15 of the 24 members at that time were temporary, and that over 50% of the CCMP's funding pays staffing costs, leaving very limited funds for capital investments. She made a recommendation in that regard in relation to the budget. The city should explore a permanent resourcing and funding strategy that aligns with the role and structure of the climate change and resiliency team. Management agreed with these recommendations and promised to explore this with the annual city budget process by the fourth quarter of 2025. I don't understand this delay. I fail to see any progress in that area reflected in this proposed budget. I'm very concerned. Our city is falling much too far behind where we need to be to deal with the impacts of climate change. And climate change is not something in the distant future. It's happening now. Our citizens are suffering the effects of climate change now. I was part of a group of seniors that organized 76 events across the country on October 1st, calling for climate action at every level. Here in Ottawa, Mayor Sutcliffe presented us with a proclamation declaring October 1st Seniors for Climate Day. Our motto is later is too late. Please keep that in mind when you are deliberating on this budget and take a look at that proclamation if you can. Think of its spirit and its intent before you make your final decisions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Latita, and that was right on time. So thank you for your delegation. I'm not seeing questions from committee at this time, but appreciate you being here. Ken Johnson is next, the Adjunct Professor, School of Epidemiology and Public Health, University of Ottawa. Ken? Ken is online with us with a presentation. Ken, you've got 5 minutes to address committee.
Thank you. Okay, the slide, you can see the slides.
We can see them there. You're good to go.
Thank you for this opportunity to present to the Environment and Climate Change Committee. I had hoped to be there this morning in person. However, like many good Ottawanians, I played hockey yesterday at Tom Brown Arena and unfortunately got hit in the foot with a slap shot from Scotty at the point. So I'll be presenting over the Zoom. Besides being draft eligible for the Senators, I'm a scientist. We work based on data. Next slide, please. As you know, data are the prerequisite to effective municipal action in general and specifically here on climate change. Unfortunately, in the city of Ottawa, it appears that not enough resources or manpower are allocated to ensure that the city has a pulse on the state of the municipal climate so that appropriate climate action initiatives can be chosen, goals formulated, and effectiveness of actions monitored. Regular, timely data provide essential feedback on policy initiatives. I'd like to briefly address 3 data issues where more budget allocation appears to be needed. Number 1, trees, forests, and canopy. Next slide, please. I wanted to I want to know about the forest cover in the rural area and the urban tree canopy in the urban area. There's a target for 40%. There's a canopy study that is dated 2019. I think it uses data from 2017. I'm told that there was another aerial survey in 2022, but that data will not be processed until 2025. Just want to make sure the right slide's up because sorry, I need the next slide, please. Thank you. I'm under the impression that we are losing urban trees and rural forests. I've heard that we are losing 1,000 acres of trees every year, but this is hearsay and anecdotal, not very useful. From the budget magazine, page 64, I have learned that the city is going to plant between 75,000 and 100,000 trees. Under Mayor Watson, we were planting 125,000 trees per year. Mayor Sutcliffe promised 1 million trees would be planted over his term. That'd be 250,000 trees per year, if my math is right. So the policy direction and the data and the budget do not add up. How can you, councillors on this committee, make decisions on how many trees should be planted, how much budget should be allocated? Not once during your term of council have you received any data. Next slide, please. So my recommendation is, can you make sure there are sufficient resources for an annual remote sensing summer survey so that we can know whether our tree cover is shrinking and by how much? Next slide, please. The second issue is greenhouse gas emissions. Next slide, please. The climate breakdown is caused by greenhouse gas emissions from burning fossil fuels, as you all know. Ottawa has targets on reducing the city's carbon footprint, corporate and community emissions. In March 2019, City Council approved a motion to undertake annual GHG emission inventory reporting. Annual. The last time Council received data was for the 2020 greenhouse gas inventory, which was attached to the October 2021 Climate Master Plan status update. The last CCMP update in April 2023 failed to include an emissions report. So the latest greenhouse gas emission data were reported 3 years ago and are now 4 years old. So is Ottawa doing its fair share in reducing our emissions, our carbon footprint? Which sector needs improvement? Where are we making progress? You don't know because you don't have any data. Next slide, please. My recommendation is to ensure that there are adequate resources in Budget 2025 to produce a detailed emissions report for the City of Ottawa so that we know how we are doing and in which areas we need to make greater efforts. Next slide, please. Heat. Next slide, please. We know that the trend is for hotter summers with more heat waves and more continuous days over 30 degrees Celsius, as the graphic indicates here. We know that heat kills, especially vulnerable persons. I would venture to guess that the most important and urgent resiliency investment and budget allocation we need to make is in the cooling of apartments and houses that do not have air conditioning. Fortunately, heat pumps can do both heating and cooling. Where are the data and data sources for how many lives we have lost to heat already? How are we tracking heat deaths in Ottawa? Next slide, please. My third recommendation is to assure yourself that there are sufficient resources in Budget 2025 for heat death data to be tracked and reported to the committee annually. Next slide, please. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for your delegation, Ken. I'll just I don't see other hands up, so I'll just make a just brief comment to let you know that my understanding is there's a tree equity analysis due in March or April 2025, which will provide a good update on where the canopy is. You're absolutely right. We've seen a shrinking canopy in our city, and it's certainly alarming and something that we're working to mitigate, not just through replanting, but keeping more trees, which the new bylaw does a better job of. And then also the emissions inventory is set to come out. I know we're a bit premature, but it is set to come out soon in the next couple of months as well. So we'll look forward to that. And when those are out, I welcome back people to discuss those reports. We've obviously had a lot of staffing changes and other issues that have happened, but still making progress on those fronts. So from my discussions with staff, I know those are coming. So thank you very much for your presentation. And we're going to ask staff some questions, particularly around the heat health data you mentioned in the coming question period for them. Did you want to respond?
Yeah, I just think it's key though that you've got to ramp up the monitoring so it's yearly, not every few years with data that's older. You can't be effective in real time and real time budgets if you're dealing with data that's years old and you have no trend lines, you have no it's just not good enough.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I agree with you. We need that annual update, the regularized update to come. And it's something I'm certainly pushing for as well. So completely agree on that. And thank you very much, Mr. Johnson.
I don't think that takes a lot of resources, but it does take some. So it needs to be included in the budget.
Agreed. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Have a great day. Carol Sissons, you are the next delegation up and our final delegation for today on the budget. Thanks for being here in person. And you've got 5 minutes to present.
Well, thank you. Thank you all very much for your time. I think I don't need to say very much. I seem to be on the same wavelength as all the previous speakers, which is trees, trees, and trees. I wanted to come to speak from my very personal perspective in one of the lowest income tree covered areas in the city, Dalhousie, part of Somerset Ward, which only has a 13% tree cover, according to outdated data. So I'm with the previous speaker. Let's keep up to date. But on top of that, it's an area like many in the inner city of rapid intensification, and we're going to vertical suburban living very quickly from 9,000 people to 14,000. And there's an exciting new development, 1010 Somerset, which is designed to do many things in the center of this urban area, one of which is to add a 1.5 hectare park. And presumably, if we come anywhere close to a 40% tree cover on that park, we'll substantially increase the trees in the area. It's also doing a lot of other things, adding a school supposedly, and social housing and commercial high rise. But in the process, the first thing that will happen is a new road will go through an existing park, cutting down probably 40 mature trees. So my question really is a question about not only the limited amount of budgeting in this current budget for trees, although I'm glad to hear consider ramping up of the tree planting program, but also a timing and issue in terms of if those trees get cut right away, our very deficit community will be in further deficit. How quickly, what kind of turnaround do you get on programs like that in terms of both budgeting and actual operational? Will it be reflected in if the trees come down in 2025? Will there be budget sufficient to ameliorate that situation? And will it be feasible given the timing of complex projects like 1010 Somerset? So I think that's all I wanted to say for a very specific, concrete example of what other people have been saying about how we need detail in the budget line items to understand what we're talking about in terms of actual forward motion on some of these very important issues.
Thank you very much for your delegation, Carol. Certainly, the forestry budget is increasing year after year, and the new tree planting programs that have been announced with the right-of-way, the urban tree, the suburban tree bylaws. This is targeting exactly what you're saying, and I know we all have to do better on that end, but we're moving in that direction. Certainly, the concern around tree planting and losing our canopy staff are also seized with that, and care about the investments there as well. So I just want to say appreciate you being here and I guess with these extending circumstances and talking us about the tree budget.
Thank you. I just didn't get that impression. I thought that the forestry budget overall had gone down from 3 years ago and is sort of holding its own now, but maybe things are hidden in other places. It's hard to understand how.
No, it's been increasing and we're at a good place now. But obviously more is obviously, needed in the future too. So I just want to thank you for being here, and you'll hear questions to staff as well, which I know councillors will ask related to your questions on trees. So thank you for being here. Okay, so I think that concludes our delegations. I'm going to ask Vice Chair Carr if we're ready now for the roadmap motions. Clerk to the clerk's office. Okay, great. So we'll read those in. Sure, tax support is great.
Okay. Tax supported. We'll do first. Be it resolved that the Environment and Climate Change Committee recommend the council, sitting as committee of the whole, approve the Environment and Climate Change Committee 2025 tax supported draft operating and capital budget as follows. 1. Infrastructure and Water Services Department operating budget as follows. A. General Manager's Office and Business Technical Support Services operating resource requirement, page 2. B. Infrastructure Services 1. User fees, page 5. 2. Operating resource requirement, page 4. C. Asset Management Services 1. User fees, page 8. 2. Operating resource requirement, page 7. 2. Strategic Initiatives Department Climate Change and Resiliency Services operating resource requirement, page 10. 3. Public Works Department operating budget as follows. A. Solid Waste Services 1. User fees, pages 15 to 16. 2. Operating resource requirements, page 13 to 14. B. Forestry Services 1. User fees, page 19. 2. Operating resource requirement, page 18. 4. Environment and Climate Change Committee tax supported capital budget on page 20. Individual projects listed on pages 40 to 47, environment, and pages 48 to 57, solid waste, including revised page 56.
Thanks very much. And the other roadmap motion?
Yeah. On va changer des affaires un peu, je vais le lire en français. OK. Motion du budget 2125 financé par les redevances. Il est résolu
Be
que
it resolved that the Environment and Climate Change Committee recommends that the Council, sitting at Committee of the Whole, approves the Environment and Climate Change Committee 2025 rate for 2025.
I got the year wrong there.
Sorry, we don't.
2025, on va le faire en anglais. Financé par les redevances comme suit. 1.
That is
Direction
as
générale
such.
des services d'infrastructure et d'eau, service de gestion de l'eau potable. A. Frais d'utilisation, page 3.
Users fee, page 3 and 6. Operating resource requirements, page 2. Waste water services as follow. Users fee, page 9, 10. Operating resource requirement, page 8 to 10. Then stormwater, laboratory, and municipal drainage services as follow. Users fees, pages 13 to 16. Operating resource requirements, page 12. The ECCC rate-supported capital budget on pages 17 to 19. Individual project listed on page 33 to 61. Drinking water services, pages 62 to 66 for integrated water and wastewater rate portion. Pages 67 to 91, stormwater services, and page 92 to 121, wastewater services.
Okay, merci beaucoup. And we're
Thank
going
you
to
so much.
questions now. Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to staff for the detailed presentation and all the hard work to get us where we are today. I'm going to start with operating questions, and then I'm going to pause and then come back on the list to talk about my capital questions. So solid waste, I'll start in solid waste. What percentage of the total cost to offer waste collection to residents is offset by revenues accrued from selling recyclable material to various groups that purchase that material.
Counselor, if that's a little bit specific, but I'd be willing to follow up with you after this afternoon to get that answer for you.
Fair enough. Can you,
A
can
little
you,
bit of math on that one.
oh, fair enough. Can you confirm that all material that's collected is sold?
Chair, I'll start with the answer and then get Shelley McDonald to fill in. Given that we've moved to individual producer responsibility, the city no longer is responsible for recycling. That means that we're not responsible to incur the cost of recycling, but also we don't get the revenues from the commodities from recycling. So in essence, we're not getting the revenues anymore from that.
Who ultimately will decide in the future whether or not the recycling program expands to accept new material not currently collected?
Thank you for the question. So that'll be a provincial decision. And so basically we look forward as we further transition to individual producer responsibility. We are hoping to see more materials being accepted in 2026, but that would be a provincial direction.
Thank you. The number of hazardous waste depots that we offer in the city, can you talk about whether budget is determining the quantity of depots and what opportunities exist in years forward to expand those numbers? We've had a discussion about how you decide locations and perhaps being more cognizant of sort of urban focused locations, but just on the number of depots, if you could speak to that, please.
Thank you for the question. Yes, the budget does determine the number of depots that we are able to hold. As well as a reminder, most of those products have transition to individual producer responsibility. So it is the producers that are responsible to be providing those opportunities to collect the materials. So the city continues to offer our 9 events per year. We will continue to do that next year, but bringing back to committee and council's consideration a plan for moving forward. So we do continue to have conversations with the province as well as those retailers. And we do promote the Take It Back locations, which are retailers that are within our communities for things like paint, which are easily accessible, and really an opportunity for residents to be able to bring those materials back to those retailers at their convenience.
As an aside, maybe not germane to budget, I'd love to know of the total paint that's returned through various means, what percentage goes to depots that we sponsor versus what is taken back by sort of private retailers. Just on the page 15 where we have the single family household rate for 2025, I heard that the net increase, the actual net amount that taxpayers will be paying is 7% year over year. The optics look terrible on paper. Even members of the media have reported that we're raising the levy by 68%. The net increase to taxpayers is 7%, but was there any consideration about not doing what you explained, that is not amalgamating the tax portion and the levy into one levy just because this looks bad? People are going to ask, well, are the savings from the tax portion coming back to me? Obviously, we know what the tax rate is now, but did it have to be this way? Is it just cleaner for accounting purposes? If you could provide a little input on that, that'd be great.
Yeah, through the chair, that's a good question. So if you recall back to the long range financial plan, we had a chart there where we identified was basically $56 was collected through the property tax, and then $145 was collected through the rate. So that totals 201. In addition to that, on the property tax bill, the commercial properties were contributing about $26 per commercial property. So really the restated amount is really $227. So that's where, we talked about it on the team in terms of showing a restated 2024, but we felt that would create further confusion. But I'm happy to take it away and kind of circulate before council what a restated would look like, factoring in those pieces to kind of piece it together. that might be useful for committee members.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Just moving along to trees, are all of the activities related to the derecho complete? That is all fallen trees, all stumps, any work related to tree cleanup, is that all complete by now?
It is, Counselor. Thank you for
Okay,
that.
fair enough. And just on the Trees and Trust program, we have been clear on our direction that we did not want to wait for a property owner to request a tree, that we wanted to be much more proactive. Can I just get an update on where we are? Have we transitioned to that? Are we in transition? And I want to make sure the budget reflects the net increase of trees that will be a result of implementing this direction.
Thank you, Counselor. So there is money in the 2025 budget for the implementation of the proactive right-of-way tree replacements. So those would have been formally implemented through the Trees and Trust program. It'll now switch to a proactive approach. So the resident won't need to call us to request a replacement. The replacement will be automatic where space exists.
Fair enough. Chair, I have many questions on the capital side with water infrastructure, so I'll yield the floor now and come back.
Okay, you still have a minute left if you wanted, but I will come back to you after. Councillor Hill.
Oh, thank you, Chair. In the tax supported budget, you identified 1.5 million in lower revenue to soil management and scrap metal sales due to the lack of capacity. Why has our capacity been reduced in this area, and what's our plan to increase capacity to make more revenue off of our landfill moving forward?
Thank you for the question. So typically we use excess soil or waste soil from construction projects which can't be used on the construction site. We have that material coming into trail and we use it to construct berms or for daily cover. Over the last number of years, we've seen an increase in the quantity of material coming into trail. And as a result, we have a lot of material already stockpiled on site. So our abilities to take in more soil has dramatically reduced. We accounted for this reduction in the long-range financial plan. And so we will continue to be looking for opportunities and working closely with our partners in IWS regarding the council priority project related to excess soil to see if there are opportunities or see what opportunities can be brought forward.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad to see the $192,000 for increased promotion and education. How will this money be spent, and will it include funding for education campaigns aimed at elementary and high school students?
Thank you for the question. So we appreciate and understand that working closely with our school boards is something that's critical. And currently now we do provide some multilingual communication information to various school boards in order to help support which bin does my item go in, for example. So those efforts will continue, as well as opportunities in order to increase or further increase our diversion efforts. As per the solid waste master plan, there are going to be additional promotional opportunities outlined in the first year, including opportunities for repair cafes or increasing those opportunities in order to support residents to be increasing their diversion efforts at home.
Okay, thank you. In the budget, you identified operating costs of landfill equipment and increased fleet costs as budgetary pressures. Is this a result of older machinery? And if so, is there a long-term goal to replace that machinery with cost-effective diesel options, or will this equipment be caught up in the city's green energy fleet mandate?
Yeah, Councillor. So basically, we follow our fleet replacement plan. And what we do is as new units are required for the life cycle plan, we replace those. And we're always looking at the most energy efficient vehicles as long as it can meet the operational requirements. So obviously, when we look at our heavy duty vehicles, we're kind of restricted in terms of what kind of energy efficient vehicles are available for those heavier equipment. But we always look for the most, green efficient first, as long as it can meet the objectives of the operations. So all these vehicles are basically, they follow a standard life cycle plan in terms of uses. On the bigger ticket items like you would see on Trail Road, we go by number of hours. Obviously, their kilometers are not huge, but we look at the number of hours. And then we also look at a factor of if we start to see you know, if a heavy piece of equipment has a standard life of 12 years and we're in year 10 and we're seeing, you know, extraordinary higher maintenance costs, we look at that as well as try and replace that one a little bit earlier because it doesn't make sense to invest into a aging vehicle, if you will.
Thank you. For the solid waste services, we're seeing an increase of $42 million to fees and services. That's a 51% increase from last year's revenue projections. We're also seeing a reduction now in the curbside pickup service from 6 items to 3. With that in mind, what benefits, either short-term or long-term, can taxpayers expect to see from that increased fee burden?
Councillor, I guess I'll take a stab at it. I mean, the reality is it's aligned to the long-range financial plan and the solid waste master plan in terms of, you know, waste diversion and extending the life of the trail road facility, you know, meeting our long-term goals in terms of what the master plan laid out. So, you know, those are some of the benefits from operational side. And Shelley, I don't know if you want to top a bit more up on that. It's more of a master plan type question.
Sure. Thank you for the question. So as Cyril alluded to, with the approval of the solid waste master plan, we're eagerly looking forward to setting up those implementation programs that will provide additional opportunities for our residents to be diverting waste from landfill, recognizing that the landfill is a very critical city asset, and maintaining it for as long as possible is in all of our financial interests.
Thank you. And I guess my last question at this point would be just to follow up one of the delegations with regard to, I guess, the business plan going forward and, you know, how we have landed with regard to, you know, new personnel in the department and such, and prognosis going forward and predictability in terms of scheduling and such. So I would just wonder if staff could speak to their perspective on being able to give some deliverables back to this committee so that we can have, you know, improve our public transparency on some of the goals that we have.
Councillor, I think you're specifically talking about the climate change budget. I think, okay, yep. So basically in the budget as well, you know, we talked about the 5 million moving to 6 million on the capital side. Another important factor, if you refer to the details in the operating side of the equation, is we're also giving a 390K increase to the base budget on the operating side. So that was basically in previous budgets, that was cost that we would transfer or charge to the capital program. So now we've again added more base budget on the operating side. So it actually relieves pressure on the capital side. So technically, you know, that's a $1.4 million increase year over year. Also, if you look at the operating summary resource requirements templates, you know, the staffing in this department is now at 31. So we made significant investments over the past number of years in terms of stabilizing, increasing, and kind of putting the focus there from a climate change perspective. And also globally, I talked about this last year during the budget process. You know, it's important not to focus exclusively on the climate change in isolation, the 6 million and the operating budget, because if you look at the larger investments across the city, that $375 million investment from a climate change perspective also needs to be considered, because there's a number of initiatives across all portfolios that are directly contributing to the climate change goals. So, you know, carving out just one component in the climate change team is only a small aspect of the global City of Ottawa as an organization components and investments in climate change.
Councillor Hill, I'll just ask staff to elaborate on that. The budget piece is very helpful, but just perhaps Ms. Stewart or Mr. McDonald, if you could just elaborate on the reports coming back to committee that the delegations were asking about, that I think Councillor Hill was also asking about on that side. Can you just go into a few more details about when and how some of those pieces are coming back to us?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question, Chair. If I can maybe just take a step back and provide a bit of context and some observations as a new general manager coming into the role. So as you know, there were some direction from council that was, I think, important to hear, and then aligned with findings from the Auditor General. And in both cases is really pointing to the need to bring more focus, prioritization, and better allocation of resources to the highest impact priorities. This important work, and this is the work that the team has been focusing quite heavily on. And in fact, those findings led to the creation of the Strategic Initiatives Department. It led to the elevation of the climate change and resiliency to a service area And I think that demonstrates the importance of the work and how the city views this work. The team now has a much stronger voice at the table. They're able to collaborate much more effectively with colleagues across the organization. It's something I observed in all the conversations that I have had. And so just to say, significant effort to realign and reprioritize has been important, and it will continue to be important as we ensure that we're focused on the most important actions, that we're mitigating the greatest risks, and that we're achieving the greatest impacts. And we had a delegate to talk to data, and that is in fact part of our strategy as well, as aligning that and backing it with data. Just quickly, a couple other things that we're going to be looking at is we're going to be looking at our capacity and our competencies and putting in place to enhance that, to make sure we have the team that's going to be able to drive this agenda forward. And we are given a mandate that I find quite exciting to really think more creatively, innovatively, to collaborate and to partner both within and outside of the city. And that will help us advance the directions. And so while that work, which I do think is critical and important to continue, I just want to emphasize that work on advancing the climate change master plan has not stopped. There is work that's been happening all along. So in parallel, strategic thinking, as well as executing to make sure that we're advancing. And Cyril had mentioned the importance of the investments that are happening across the organization. And so leveraging this expertise that resides in that team and better integrating across the organization is having really beneficial impacts. In terms of the specific question around what's coming forward, we will be coming forward in early in the new year, likely in Q2, with the findings of reporting back on the audit, in particular focusing on the prioritization. It's important to get the direction from committee and council in terms of the prioritization and have that feed into the other work. We have other pieces of important and I think high impact work that'll be coming forward as well. Implementation of the high performance development standards is one. We know that building retrofits are building emissions are quite high. The other area that we're focusing on and starting to do more work with colleagues really is on deeper building retrofits. So we'll look at what we're doing in that space. We will be coming back with the tree canopy and in particular the equity lens on the tree canopy, as well as the updates to the greenhouse gas inventories, emission inventories. And then finally, and we think this is really important, we would come back with the update on the CCMP itself. The reason that it would follow the audit response is because we feel it's important to get the direction from committee and council to be able to embed that in the refresh of the CCMP.
Okay, thanks very much for that comprehensive answer. Oh, sorry, Councillor Hill, I cut you off there, but I just wanted to make sure to get more information on that. Do you have other questions?
No, I just wanted to close out by saying thank you very much. I appreciate that robust commentary, and I certainly not lost on me the amount of significant work that's gone in from the general manager, from your whole crew, and it's appreciated. So thank you very much for the response to my answer or the answers to my questions. And yeah, I yield. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks very much, Councillor. Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Chair. And I appreciate all the work that's gone into this. We are moving forward. And I also want to thank the delegations. They were excellent delegations. Lots of expertise there. And I think we're lucky that they take the time to come out. So thank you to all. Just a reminder that it was a couple of years ago that you and I moved a motion in regards to climate change. So I just forwarded that to you as a reminder, on solar panels, et cetera. So it's just a reminder to see how we're doing on that, on the solar panels. As I was mentioning, I was looking at those slides on, for different locations that we have in the city, and I can see a lot of potential for growth. How is those projects coming along?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. So as the councillor mentioned, we have 12 city facilities that currently have solar panels. And there is a group and a team that is dedicated to take a look at the suitability of using existing facilities moving forward as well. So we do have a team that will look at that and provide recommendations. So it is an active program.
Okay, great. Are the filtration plants on the list by any chance?
That is something that could be taken into consideration in suitability and location.
I know previously I asked about the new stage 2 stations because they're wide open as well. And that was rejected in terms of that it's still, because it's a P3 project, it isn't ours. But I think we have to look at that for the future. Mind you, affordable housing would be better at those locations, but we'll work on that as time goes on. Thank you. In terms of trees, so the pledge to have 1 million trees would be 250,000 per year. And it doesn't look like the budget covers that. So just want to get an update on that.
Chair, I think, and I don't want to speak to the mayor on behalf of the mayor because this was really a mayor's pledge. But what we know is that the mayor wasn't specific around who was planting the trees. It was basically just wanting more trees to be planted. So if the NCC are planting trees or other organizations, that would also form part of that number. What we have been shifting in terms of focus is around, it's not just about the quantity of trees, and I want to pick up on comments that the chair made, is more around where do we actually need those trees to be planted? If we're going to increase our tree canopy, especially in areas that basically we're fall short of the target now, it's going to require more significant investments. The trees, the cost per tree is higher, which means that we may not be getting as many trees in the ground, but we're trying to get the trees where they should be placed, where we're getting the greatest return on investment. When we focus just on the quantity, what ends up happening is we end up diverting resources towards planting thousands of trees more in open spaces, rural areas, and that's not really the area that we're trying to target in terms of improving the tree canopy.
Okay. One of the things that is very noticeable in Bay Ward is the loss of trees because of the cut and cover tunnel for stage 2 LRT. And I don't know how that is being quantified in the statistics, but we lost a lot of trees. They're supposed to be replaced at a 2-to-1 ratio. Is that being calculated in as well? That is so glaring. You only have to look at pictures from 2019 to now. You know, it's needed and it's a positive thing, but we need those trees back. And I just want to know how they're counted in.
So Chair, I'll start and then I'll ask either Ali or Tracy to fill in. They wouldn't be included in numbers right now. The numbers that really are part of the budget are the ones that the city is planning through different initiatives. What's not included in there are basically compensation plans that we may have through the development process or through some of the capital projects where additional trees are also going to be done. So when we look at the amount that's in the budget right now, that's not the only opportunities that we have to plant trees. We have opportunities to plant trees through capital projects and then through the development process where there may be trees removed, but then there's a compensation plan. The LRT is definitely one where there's a fair sum of money that we're anticipating to be able to have compensation to be able to plant trees in different locations, but they're not in the 100,000 number that you're seeing in the budget now.
Okay, thank you. I know that's top of mind for my community. In terms of heat pumps, we heard from cafes about suggestions about for buildings with no air conditioning, and I'm seeing that is becoming a huge issue, especially for older adults. Is there anything that we can do to help tenants access heat pumps as a city?
So Chair, the Better Homes Loan Program was designed to make it easier and more affordable for homeowners to pay for energy improvements that contribute to meeting the city's GHG reduction targets. As directed by council, staff are undertaking an evaluation of the program, including reviewing the impact of the federal programs that were announced following the launch of our loan program. And the intent is to report back to council later in 2025 with recommendations on the future of the program and potential improvements that can be made to the program. To date, we've seen 254 completed retrofits, including 98 in 2024, valued at greater than 8.8 million in disbursements.
Okay, and that's for homeowners. So this is what happens is it's primarily renters that are suffering. So so we have to look at possibility of helping them out rather than having those air conditioners. Have we looked at that possibility?
So Chair, we've been collaborating with the Canadian Home Builders Association to utilize National Research Council funds to support net zero housing retrofits, primarily focused on co-op housing.
Okay, and as I've mentioned before, places like Mikinak have individual heat pumps for each unit. So that's the future, but it's these older buildings that I'm concerned about, and I have quite a few of them in Bay Ward. And if you visited them in July and August, you'd know how bad it is, because it's pretty hot in there. So I think it's something that we may have to look at in terms of incentives to help out. It's definitely an issue. Just going back on the solar panels, is it possible to get a list of buildings that are being considered?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we can follow up with you after the meeting on that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kavanaugh. Councillor Plante.
Oh, c'est moi. OK. Merci. Oui, j'avais juste quelques questions.
Yes, I just had a few questions. I'll start with protective plumbing program.
The eligibility criteria for the protective plumbing program.
Hello, Councillor. So the residential protective program provides financial assistance to qualified City of Ottawa property owners for the installation of protective plumbing devices, such as sump pumps and storm and sanitary backwater valves to prevent water and sewage from flooding homes as a result of increased water level in the city sewer system. Our current average over the past few years is to provide roughly 33 grants each year. We're currently scheduled to bring the report in Q1 2025 to improve the application process, because we know there are some issues with the application, and introduce new grant opportunities and increase available funds for covered items, which will increase program participation, hopefully. We do not require any additional funds. What we have budgeted is more than enough. It's expected to meet current demands over the next couple of years while we evaluate the proposed changes that should come into effect in 2025 if passed at council. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, merci. So how many people every year apply and are turned away?
So 33 up to date.
So 33 applied and then 33 got it?
Correct. Everyone who applied has received the grant.
Okay. Will there be an increase in the budget for the next 4 years to meet the growing demand?
No. So the current budget that we have, we don't actually have enough applicants. And we think that the reason why we're not using all of the budget is because of the application process is a bit complicated and might discourage some residents. So the improvements that we're proposing in Q1 2025 will basically streamline the application process, and with the hopes to encourage more people to apply. And we're not expecting an increase in the budget in the next few years.
Okay. And last, is the city investing in other preventative ways to absorb floodwaters, such as sponge forest, permeable surfaces, right-of-way, permeable gardens, etc.?
Yeah, Councillor, just before staff answer, I'll just also just mention, we did go through, I know you're not on the committee, but we did have these motions and reports come back to committee, in particular on the residential protected plumbing program, and certainly some positive moves there to change the application criteria. There is more available online from those staff reports, but I'll let staff answer on the piece about sponge forests and other elements. To Sue Johns.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are always, as part of any master studies that we do, sometimes there are recommendations for specific areas of improvement. I'm thinking of the Pinecrest study had implications, and we ended up with the Rain Ready program, for example, which is not in city-owned property. Likewise, we had a pilot project of permeable pavement actually at Carlingwood Library that was an outcome of a master study looking for ways of improving response to storms. There is always innovation that we are applying in our renewal projects in terms of what fits best for what we know about any area. And of course, the other opportunity is through development processes. A lot of new infrastructure is built through our planning approvals process. And that's another opportunity that we have for leadership.
Okay, and my second part, Chair, is I just wanted to express my support for the funding being allocated to the circular economy initiatives. We have many great small businesses in Ward 12 that are contributing to our community by providing lower cost but high quality alternatives for clothing, household goods, and more. I hope they will benefit somehow from the work that's already being done. So just a couple questions. How can I connect businesses and residents with in my ward in the circular economy and waste reduction initiatives that the city is funding?
So I'll just go to LA. Did you want to actually Shelley McDonald? Sorry, I see your mic on.
Sure. Hi, thank you so much for the question. Through you, Chair. So in the first year, we will be looking at implementing or putting together the strategy. And at that point, there'll be opportunities for us to be engaging with you in order to understand better some of the outreach opportunities, maybe with local business.
And then will councillors be involved also in developing the circular economy strategy?
Through you, Chair, yes, the strategy itself will be brought back for committee and council approval.
Okay, and what is the timeline?
So we hope to start the work next year, and we'll be able to report back as part of our updates on when we can expect bringing back a strategy.
Okay, that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair. And first and foremost, I'd like to really thank city staff for their hard work on the draft operating and capital budget. We appreciate the work that's been undertaken and the information that has been provided and the answers to questions. You know, on the spectrum of good, better, and best, I think that $5 million for our climate change master plan was good. The extra $1 million is better, Chair. But of course, what's best is more investments in the climate change master plan. And so I did have a question around the allocation of dollars for that plan on page 45. The request is listed as at $6 million, but the spending plan itself is $7.5 million. So I just wanted staff to explain this discrepancy.
Yeah, through the chair. So this is common throughout most of the projects and the details in all the committee books. So basically what we show is there's a little box that we talk about the projected year-end unspent balance. So at a point in time, when we start to build these details, we look at what's not been spent from previous budget authorities. So unlike capital, the money rolls over. Unlike operating, capital money rolls over. So on an operating basis, you know, whatever is spent or not spent at the end of the year, that falls to our bottom line, we report back. From a capital perspective, any project that's not spent, that rolls over into the next year, and we add on to that. The spending plans, you know, we try and benchmark in terms of what we plan to spend, but as you go across the projects and initiatives, a little shift, a little delay, we don't spend to that amount. So basically what we try and do is work with the departments, say so we use this also from a cash flow perspective, you know, what is our planned updated spending each year? So that's why you see a little bit higher spending in 2025, more than the actual budget authority, because there's unspent money from prior year budgets.
I appreciate that answer, and of course, in our zealousness to really implement these plans and based on the urgency of the implementation of climate change mitigation and other strategies, of course, we want to see more dollars allocated. So I think it's important to continue to advocate for that and to ensure that those investments are made. I know that part of the investments are also allocated new capital funding to the important work of the Forestry Department in carrying out proactive tree planting in the right-of-way program that was approved by Council in June. We know, and I know that Councillor Kavanaugh was asking questions to this effect, so maybe I'll try to ask the question in a different way. I'm just wondering, what is the pace of investment that we would require to reach a 1 million tree planting target? We note that the investments here, I believe, is $1.9 million in our tree planting program. But in order to reach a larger target of that magnitude, what type of investment would be required?
Chair, I'll start with the question and then let the team follow in with additional details. So we haven't really costed what it would take to plant the million trees, because right now our focus has been providing additional planting strategies in front of council that will incrementally increase the number of trees that are being planted. But what we want to make sure is that the trees are being planted in areas of need. And what we're seeing is over time, the areas of needs are the areas where it's more complicated and it's more costly also to plant. When we start shifting to a focus of volume, the problem there is we start shifting our resources towards managing bigger planting contracts, and those tend to be more in rural type areas. To be able to get larger volumes, they tend to be smaller, they tend to be more seedlings type instead of being caliper trees. So we achieve a higher number, but at the end of the day, we're not necessarily getting closer to our 40% target for the urban area. So that's why we've tried to shift the focus from being a quantity piece in terms of trying to get to a specific number and looking at basically where do we have gaps in terms of trees? What is it going to take to plant trees in those areas? How do we make sure that we're replanting trees that we're losing now? So for example, the proactive tree planting strategy that committee approved was basically, instead of letting the residents request a tree to be replaced, is that we would take a proactive approach that basically if the tree is removed for whatever reason, we would proactively work with the resident to go back in to install it, because those are areas where we're falling behind now. But we're also trying to direct the investments towards area that is going to help us from an equity perspective, an area where we have gaps to be able to get trees planted. The problem is that doesn't generate the high volume, but it will provide basically the quality of trees that we need.
I appreciate that answer. I think it is important for us to be proactive, and I endorse that strategy along with many around this committee table. But I think it's also important to continue to take a look holistically in terms of the approach going forward. I think that we have a good start in terms of replacement, 2 for 1. I think we are having a better start in terms of looking at equity, but I do think that volume does matter if we are interested in reducing and impacting or reducing and mitigating the impacts of climate change. Then I think that it's incumbent upon us to explore exponential growth in terms of tree planting. I just had just a few other observations, positive observations, really encouraged by the 1.5 million allocated for continued enhanced waste diversion efforts in our parks. I know that that is very, very popular. I hear it across the board, and we want to see more investments there. The community members, residents really do appreciate that, as well as our household hazardous waste drop-off events. I saw that firsthand at the Ottawa Baseball Stadium in April. The uptake is tremendous. There's a tremendous need for more opportunities for drop-off events in the core. And I can also say that there was also high appreciation for the repair cafes. And I saw the good work of staff and the repair cafe here at City Hall. So more money in these types of investments that ensure greater resident participation in the reduction of waste and the continued utilization that I think we heard from Councillor Plante in terms of a cyclical economy are very important investments that have been proposed in this budget. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor King. Great comments. And just on Councillor King King's point about the three stream in parks, or I guess the waste diversion in parks. Is it the continuation of one per ward park being converted? Is there more that's coming to be more permanent? Just on the allocation for 2025 specifically, maybe you could just detail that.
Through you, Chair, yes, we understand and appreciate that that's extremely popular. So what we plan to bring back with the approval of the master plan, recognizing that we're moving from a pilot to something more permanent, coming back with a strategy for how we are going to outfit our close to 1,300 parks. So currently we have 55 parks that are outfitted with the three stream bins. Those will maintain. And what we do plan to do in 2025 is look for those opportunities for some of those weekend events that generate more waste in some of our loved parks, as well as look for some additional organic opportunities in order to provide green bins for those dog walkers. So we do plan to be bringing back a fulsome strategy for council's consideration and approval in 2025, which will support the rollout of the three stream in the balance of our parks, recognizing that not every park probably needs to have three streams, but maybe better off with a green bin in order to support dog walking activities. So working with our partners in our CFS, recognizing the number of parks and the types of parks that we have, we'll work on that strategy to bring back for council approval.
Thanks very much. I'll just say that it is great having councillors be able to input which parks in their wards are receiving the three stream. Obviously, more is better, but councillors have a good idea of which ones are most needed. So just encourage that type of activity and consulting with councillors for that piece, and really appreciate staff's work on that component. Councillor Brown, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And Cyril, I'm going to start with you. Just building off of one of Councillor King's questions about the capital works in progress. And you have already provided an outline as to how that rollover happens. For example, the energy management and investment strategy has about $4.3 million across each of the budget years of unspent, and from what I'm reading here, unallocated funding. And this year, staff's requesting another $2.85 million. I'm not looking to take money away, but I want to ensure that we're not artificially inflating the budget and we just carry on year after year, continually topping up that budget line item. So is there a year where we might go back and look at all of the unspent funding through the different budget years to see if we could utilize those funds instead of asking for more?
Through the chair, great question. I can tell you that we do that every year, Councillor. So basically what we do, and my colleagues can attest to this, as we go through the budget process, I'm always challenging looking at what they got in the past versus what they spent. But the important one there to highlight is the capital closure process that we come forward with every year in June. So what we do from a finance perspective is we also date stamp the capital project. So the IO number, that's the 9,000 series number that you see. And when we go through the capital closure process every year, we look at, we do a little bit of an aging of all the capital programs that exists, and we try and make sure we kind of clean that up as much as we can. Typically, we'd like to see, between a 3 and 5 year life per project, but then it gets into some complexities because when you look at some of the work that we do, intersections is a good example where, there's warranties. So sometimes we got to leave those projects open for a little longer because there could be some warranty commitments that we resolve. But the reality is, to be frank, we do it every year. We use the capital closure process as a process to clean up and return money back to source, and that kind of helps us project for the upcoming budget cycle.
Thank you very much. And specifically for the Better Home Loans program for the heat pump incentive, I looked back in the 2024 budget, and at that time, the capital works in progress said that in the 2023 year, there was $3,000 spent through that program. This year, we're seeing that there's $18,000 that was spent. The total line item is worth $800,000. How is that funded? And do we need to keep that much money in that program if we're seeing such a small expenditure each and every year?
So Chair, the Better Homes Loan Program uptake was initially very strong, but has seen diminishing returns. As I noted, in addition, there were 2 federal programs that were not announced since the launch of the program. This program is funded through the funds that have been made available to us through FCM and Van City Bank. However, as directed by council, we are undertaking the evaluation of the program and will be returning to council with recommendations on the future of the program and any potential improvements that can be made to it.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Will. And I guess my last question, their staff are requesting 2 FTE positions for stormwater. Can I just understand what those two positions are?
Mr. Chair, the 2 positions within our stormwater budget, we also have the responsibility of laboratory services. So we have changing regulations that we need to keep up on. So one is for a laboratory technologist. We also have ongoing and emerging maintenance needs of our stormwater facilities and stormwater ponds. So we also have a lot of development that's going on as well. So we are adding a maintenance coordinator to that budget.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Vice Chair Carr.
Thank you very much, Chair. I always appreciate being further down in the questions because most of mine have disappeared by this point. But I do have a few questions on trees. So first, finished. I wanted to thank staff very much for all their work. I wanted to follow up. Sorry, Councillor King had asked some questions on trees, and I wanted to go with that theme. I appreciated hearing that we weren't just counting the trees, that in the mayor's commitment, it wasn't just counting the trees that were planted on city property by city staff. Do we have any ways, I mean, to count all of the trees that are being planted on properties such as Ottawa Community Housing, school board properties where we've seen a proliferation of tree planting programs and tiny forests? Are those tracked mostly through tree canopy, or do we have any way of collating all that data citywide?
Thank you, Councillor. So Forestry is not collecting that external data at this time. We're working right now through the Urban Forest Management Plan to collect the data internally from, say, infrastructure services or other projects, development projects, subdivisions that happen across the city, so we can integrate that data into Forestry's data and get those trees into our tree inventory for future maintenance. But at this time, we're not collecting external tree planting data.
And Chair, sorry, just to elaborate on the question, the piece that we're also trying to focus is basically, instead of trying to capture every tree that's, where's a tree been removed, where's one being replaced, is really leveraging the tree canopy data. And that's something that we're going to be working with our colleagues in the climate change team in terms of the frequency of that collection information, because ultimately that's our goal through the OP is to increase the tree canopy. And that's really is the best measure of the inputs and the outputs that we may see when it comes to the number of trees that are either planted or being removed.
So we're improving the aerial mapping, and is there a way to improve the time that it takes to get that data back so that we have it on that more regular basis?
So Chair, trees are slow in development. And so the best practice is every 5 or 10 years to undertake a canopy cover survey like we're undertaking.
Okay, thanks. You know, there's a lot of neighborhood groups that are participating in tree plantings, and can I actually, you know what, it's probably too detailed. I'll go offline. I was going to ask why we can't accept trees from Canadensis and native trees, but I'll ask that outside of committee. One of my concerns with the tree canopy data is always that it counts the buckthorn. And in some of the higher equity neighborhoods that show that we have a lot of tree cover, it's actually covered a lot by buckthorn. We are way behind in terms of invasive plant management. I think everybody acknowledges that. We even have seen NCC recently machine removing the buckthorn in the Maple Grove. I'm not sure where that neighborhood is, unfortunately. But I did see that NCC, we've got other communities all across Ontario that are further advanced. I understand from my discussions with you and Ali, Mr. Gontier, that we are looking towards, first of all, trying to seek some funding externally to see if we can start to map out some of the invasives and also waiting for the report to come back to community services on community gardens and other greening initiatives to see if we can better support community groups doing this. I don't know if anybody can respond to that particular point.
Thank you for that question. Staff are continuing to have discussions amongst multiple departments to determine the feasibility in terms of program development, resourcing, and possible solutions to managing invasive species within the resources that we have, or perhaps leveraging external sources that might be available to us. We do some work, as you know. We have a wild parsnip program. We have a strategy with respect to emerald ash borer. Through the UFMP, Forestry Services has some capacity to work on community groups, with community groups on stewardship programs related to forest health, mind you. And this includes removal of invasive species such as buckthorn. And to date in 2024, we've assisted with 23 community-led programs. I'd also like to mention that through climate change, we've funded a position to work on forestry health strategy as well. So there are initiatives that we are undertaking internally, and we do understand that invasive species management is a priority and something that we are looking to manage better.
Yeah, thanks. And I know we approved a revised UFMP maybe about a year ago, and there was a piece on invasives that was removed. And I do appreciate the support that has been provided by staff, even in terms of when we moved to 3 bags and the support that staff showed me in terms of making sure that we had yellow bags available to these groups that do remove our invasives. It's important that they continue to have those resources, and I've appreciated the streamlined consent to enter process, and I know that's well, actually, it is. We within strategic initiatives now within the corporate real estate office. I do appreciate that work that has been done, but I hope that we can continue to make inroads on that. Just with respect to invasives, are we, when we're updating the tree planting strategy, are we looking at those trees which are on our list that are invasives? And I know we've had discussions about the calorie pear and that sort of stuff. I noticed that there was a pilot, I think it's in Councillor Menard's ward, with a different sort of planting on glebe and bank. And is that the sort of program or initiative that can help have those trees be more resilient in the downtown areas where that pear tree has been used traditionally, even though it's invasive?
Thank you, Councillor. So through the tree planting strategy, we're starting up our project to look at recommended tree species for Ottawa. So we'll be looking at all the trees that are in our inventory, trees that we purchase, where are they best suited for planting, which are in, there are non-native, non-invasive species. So we'll be looking at all of our tree species and then applying those to our tree planting programs.
Okay, thank you very much. And I appreciate that. I think everybody around this council is united in a love for trees, so it's very positive. I'll just move quickly to a couple questions on solid waste. I'll just repeat what Councillor King said. Very happy that we're moving towards those very popular 3 waste bins. And with respect to diversion programs, the investment in that is very important. Just a very specific question. I was back home visiting my mom in Edmonton a few weeks ago, and I stumbled upon something called Blenders Garment Recyclers, and they have a program. It's like a store where you can recycle your textiles there, and those that can't be resold, they deconstruct and incorporate them into other products. Have we made any inroads in terms of textile recycling? Because I think it's a huge issue.
Thank you for the question. I love it when you go back to Edmonton because you come back with all these wonderful ideas as an aside. So that is part of the work that we're going to be undertaking next year as part of the approval of the master plan.
Okay, thanks. I'll let you go to the next and I'll get back on if I need to. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Councillor Devine.
Well, I mean, I can get on a plane and go to Edmonton anytime you want, Shelley, and I'll come back with all kinds of good ideas. Not about you, Mark. Don't worry about it. Yeah. So I've got one enthusiastic and hopeful comment, and I'll follow that with two enthusiastic and hopeful questions. So my comment comes on the heels of what my colleague, Councillor Kavanagh. Everything okay? Thank you. So my comment comes on the heels of what my colleague, Councillor Kavanagh, spoke to about the possibility of greater investment in solar panels on rooftops of municipal facilities. Just to say that I certainly am hopeful to see what the city's plans are for this. Now, I've had so I just want to encourage staff on this because I've had really good meetings with staff and Hydro Ottawa and private sector leaders, Diamond Storage being one of them, Ottawa owned, Ottawa proud, where we're seeing that the private sector is leading the way in showing just how much potential there is to pick some low-hanging fruit that can provide a really good return for a relatively low capital investment. And I know that there's willingness, even around this committee horseshoe, to see investments into what the corporation can do to clean up our own house when it comes to high-value investment. So I really do look forward to what comes of that. My first question, and I think this will be a question for you, Tammy. My question isn't in relation to any specific line item in the budget, but more to ask about existing options within the various programs and initiatives that the budget supports. So I am an advocate for considering that every dollar we spend on infrastructure is a dollar that we spend on climate resilience. To that effect, I look forward to a meeting that I'm going to be having with senior staff in December to discuss innovations in pavement infrastructure, specifically in the realm of permeable pavement as a means of more effective stormwater management. So as we look to the horizon for 2025, and whether or not this is something to be addressed at Environment Committee or Transportation Committee, I'm not sure, but can staff speak to whether there are funded programs already in place that could support pilot projects or other initiatives that can explore these and other kinds of technological innovations?
We appreciate the question, Mr. Chair. So built in our operating and capital budgets is the flexibility to take a look at what are emerging practices, the use of artificial intelligence, so different technologies. So that is something that is built into our innovation and continuous improvement. So you won't find it in a specific line item, but it is built into our capacity.
Thank you. I look forward to talking more about that. And my second question, and perhaps this is a question for Shelley, is on the issue of three-stream waste diversion. As to expanding this program into our parks, I'm confident this is going to be something that is going to be highly appreciated by most councillors. But can I ask whether that investment will see more three-stream waste diversion receptacles in some of our major municipal facilities? And I ask that because I'm not sure if there's any kind of uniformity across all of our major facilities, whether that's, and I'll just speak in proximity to my own ward, whether that's Ben Franklin Place or Nepean Sportsplex. I might not be perfectly accurate in my understanding of which of these do or don't have three-stream diversion, but I'm pretty sure that some of our major facilities that have tons and tons of people coming through eating hot dogs and all that, that they don't have three-stream. So are we looking to improve that?
Through you, Chair, yes, we are. That is a priority. And we do have active and willing partners in rec and culture facilities in order to be working with us on that.
Perfect. Thank you very, very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor. So I'm going to go to Councillor Tierney, who's also the FCM rep for our city, and then I'll go back to Councillor Brockton on the second round. So, Councillor
Wonderful.
Tierney.
Thank you very much, and great segue, Sean. So thank you, Chair. I appreciate that. So first of all, I did want to point out the great work that has been done. And there's actually been some questions. Maybe I should circulate a little more information around too about when it comes to heat pumps and programs like the Enviro Center. They received $2 million for Carver Place in my ward to energy retrofit community housing. That was part of a larger FCM play at $5 million for 5 projects. So there actually is stuff happening in the background. Mea culpa, I'll circulate some of that information so you're aware of that. But I think this highlights another aspect of things is where do we capture all the monies that we've received? FCM has they have a very large $2.4 billion fund that they manage specifically for that. And I know we tap into it on occasion for certain things like the retro program. We're talking about it for some future items, but then there's a lot of groups that take great advantage of it. That, you know, is not on the municipal taxpayer. We're taking it in. The Enviro Center gets it on their behalf through FCM. But where do we capture all this information? Because I think it's important to show, and I give credit where credit's due, where the work of FCM or the federal government has contributed to this city, because they're certainly not doing it in encampments. That's a whole other discussion. But when it comes to environments, I think this is one area that I'd like to see reflected in the budget, whether it's external group or not. How do we capture that as a city? Like, knowing that housing, they have their own charters.
Yeah.
Do we capture that anywhere centrally, or is it really up to them?
So it's a great question. So what we try and do right now, it's a very manual, onerous process. Appreciating that, you know, we have over 120 different service areas across the organization, and there's a magnitude of different funding streams, programs at various levels, you know, within the government sector, beyond our federal and provincial colleagues, FCM, et cetera.
Yeah.
So it's always a challenge where we're always doing reach out to kind of add that manual tracking file. But it's something I can certainly take away for consideration in the next cycle to see if we can own in on certain specifics, specifically as it relates to certain committees, and maybe start highlighting some of those core investments, some of which you just highlighted there. So I'll definitely take that away. But again, it is very, I mean, obviously all the revenue and all that comes in. You can, if you go through the templates in the budget, you'll see that in the revenue section where you see provincial revenue, there's a federal line revenue, there's a municipal line revenue. We have all those elements broken down. But once you get into the thousands and thousands of line items, that's where it kind of gets a little bit untrackable at a systematic level.
Yeah.
Trackable at a global level in a manual process is something that we've been looking at for a number of years now in terms of, you know, how can we leverage our system to kind of improve that? But I'll take it away and see what we can kind of report back in the next cycle, maybe.
I appreciate that, and I know the chair does as well. And I'm certain if there's applications that come up in the future, any opportunity we have, maybe it's worth highlighting. We've applied for, even if we haven't received, for those, because it shows we're doing a lot of due diligence and trying to get federal monies to offset any costs we have as a city. So thank you very much, Cyril and gang, for all the work you've done on this.
Thank you very much, Councillor Tierney, and for that work at FCM in particular that benefits our city. Councillor Rockington, on your second round, I think talking more about the capital side.
That's correct, Chair. Thank you. The Carlington Heights Reservoir has been on the books, a renewal project for, we're approaching a decade now, a project that's been postponed due to other competing priorities. Project managers inform me that wheels are in motion for 2025. I've heard this before, but I'd like senior management to confirm that this reservoir project is going to be green-lit next year.
Thank you for the question, Chair. Yes, Councillor. We are about to issue the purchase order to the contractor.
Very good. Thank you. A reservoir that serves 250,000 households in Ottawa, so a significant project. General Manager Rose, I ask this question every year, and I'm going to ask it again because I think we need to ask it again. And when I'm long gone from council, I'm asking that future councillors ask this question every year. Ms. Rose, are there any critical water infrastructure renewal projects that you're aware of that are not being funded in this budget?
The simple answer is no. And I do want to thank the councillor for reminding council and senior leaders around Section 19 of the Safe Drinking Water Act, which speaks to the standard of care and the due diligence that we all have in the oversight of our water systems.
Thank you. And thank you for ensuring the budget does reflect those critical projects. It's very, very important. Can you have a brief comment on the state of our water infrastructure, particularly the pipes underneath our streets? Your department's doing great work, which includes River Ward. There's a long list of projects that are being done, particularly in my neighborhoods that are now approaching 80 years old. But what does the state of the infrastructure look like at home?
Mr. Chair, our team in asset management, along with all of the partners across the departments, we're working towards our updated asset management plans for June of 2025. So we will have updated state of the asset condition for all of our assets, including all of our critical water assets. What I can say is that we have, the people, the training, the procedures, the technology, the equipment to deliver our core services. We have representation from FCM and AMO here at the table. And so this will come as no surprise that everyone in Canada and probably the US is dealing with aging infrastructure. So that's also a consideration that we have. So Cyril has mentioned in the past, we're at the tail end of the 10-year long-range financial plan that was established in 2017. Tabling along with the asset management plans will be the next 10-year long-range financial plan for tax and rate. And so we will be putting the needs there, the forecasted needs for the next 10 years.
Very good, thank you. And what's the projected increase in the water rate?
Through Chair, 2% for 2025.
Excellent. Ms. Rose, can you explain to me and the committee how water that's drawn from wells is tested compared to water that's drawn from the river and goes through our facilities? Does it go through the same high standard of testing before people in those rural communities consume that water?
That's correct, Mr. Chair. So safe water is regulated through the province, regardless of the source, whether it comes from a river source, a surface water source, or a groundwater source. And there are very rigid regulations around the testing requirements for all of that. And so, there have been recent studies where we exceed the minimum regulatory requirements when it comes to testing of the source water and the treated water.
Excellent, thank you. And Chair, I'll just do a final comment now. Certainly I reserve the right when this comes to committee, the whole at council, to ask other questions. But that said, this is a very important department within the city doing some very good work. I appreciate the investments that are being made. There's always room for doing more, as we all know, with budgets, but I will be supporting the budget today in its entirety. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Brockington. I'm not seeing other speakers' hands up, so I'll just make some very quick comments. We certainly need to continue to see growth in capacity for our staff team as they work to mitigate and adapt to the climate crisis. The realities of climate change are already here, and we need to be honest about the fact that Ottawa residents are paying the costs for flooding, extreme weather, reduced air quality, and extreme heat with their health, their wallet, and their well-being. These are serious challenges, which science shows us will only get worse. The benefits to engaging seriously with these challenges now and doing our utmost to mitigate and adapt to them now are important, not only in terms of real financial returns to the city, but also in the real health and well-being of Ottawans. All that to say, the investments we're seeing in this budget are welcome. In addition to the $6 million which staff have allocated to the climate change master plan, staff have identified 22 capital budget requests as having moderate or major climate contributions that go beyond business as usual. This totals more than $375 million of new investments spanning projects such as our zero-emission bus fleet acquisition, converting city fleets to lower-emission vehicles, the energy management and investment strategy, actions from the solid waste master plan, and active transportation infrastructure. Well-spoken delegates today did point out that we need to have more regular reporting, the transparency on those, and I thank them for their input and their work with city staff directly. You've made a big difference in how much this city has moved towards climate action in the last few years. I do applaud staff for their work, and at the same time, I want to underline that we need to continue to push for more capacity to achieve those net zero goals by 2040 at the municipality and 2050 in the community. So thank you to staff for this important work. With that, I'll ask if the roadmap recommendations for the tax supported and rate supported recommendations are carried. Okay. Thank you very much for that, committee. So we're moving on now. We have no in-camera items. The IPD we've talked about previously. Notice of motion. I do have a notice of motion that I want to put on the floor. and then an inquiry. So just with process wise, I'll hand the chair to Vice Chair Carr, and I'll put this motion on the table and I'll do the inquiry after that, Vice Chair. So whereas the City of Ottawa has been investing in energy and GHG reduction projects since 2010 through annual strategic investment initiatives, and whereas in 2019 the City of Ottawa declared a climate emergency for the purpose of protecting our economy, our ecosystems, and our community from climate change, and whereas the City of Ottawa's climate change master plan identifies municipal leadership as required to ensure an integrated and comprehensive approach to addressing climate change across the corporation and the community, including through the integration of a climate lens into the comprehensive asset management program, the long-range financial plan, and operational plans and policies, among others. And two, critical to leading by example to set the pace, spur innovation, and catalyze community action. And whereas the energy and GHG reduction program was officially established in 2019, investing $3 million annually in energy conservation projects that reduce energy use and GHG emissions at city facilities and achieve an 8-year aggregate payback. And whereas the city has invested a total of $32 million in energy and GHG reduction projects, which has netted the city $43.5 million in savings over the last 14 years. And whereas the program has completed most of the projects which provided the shortest term return of value to the city in terms of payback, and whereas a greater focus is needed on retrofits as a means to achieve the City of Ottawa's GHG reduction goals, in addition to energy efficiency goals, therefore be it resolved that the Infrastructure and Water Services Department be directed to explore opportunities for funding, collaboration, and implementation of municipal retrofits internally and with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, Hydro Ottawa /Envari, and the federal and provincial governments to ensure alignment of objectives and the best opportunities to benefit the City of Ottawa, and be it further resolved that the Infrastructure and Water Services Department be directed to research alternative parameters, including longer-term savings and GHG reductions for the municipality by modification of the payback term to reframe the terms of the energy and GHG reduction program, and be it further resolved that staff report back to the Environment and Climate Change Committee by Q3 2025 with recommended funding sources, terms, and associated benefits. I just want to thank committee, but also Councillor Devine and your team for work on this. And I know certainly staff have been supportive of this, and I know the mayor's office has also been pushing for better retrofits of our buildings. So thanks to everybody involved for this. We'll consider that at our next meeting. Sorry, Chair, I'll just move to the inquiry, my own inquiry, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you so much. So this is an inquiry with regard to some lighting conversion. How many LED lighting conversion projects other than street lighting are planned for within the 2025 budget? How many of those lighting projects are located within parks, sports fields, pathways, and parking lots? What programs are available to fund exterior lighting conversion projects? And what are the cost benefits of increasing investment in exterior LED lighting conversion projects? So we'll expect to report back on that, and Chair, I'll take the chair back now. Any other business? Okay, I'm not seeing any. So we are adjourned. The next meeting of the Environment and Climate Change Committee will be on Tuesday, February 18th, 2025. Should there be a need to meet sooner, we'll call a special meeting. Thanks, everyone, for being here. Thank you.
Thank you.